My name is Sam Russell and I'm the Head of Department of Product Design. I'd like to welcome you all to Adapted to Chaos, an event to celebrate the work of this year's graduating product and interaction design students from NCAD. Now to the event. This is an opportunity for our students to share their final year design projects with you and to start a conversation around the research topics that interest them. The projects on show engage with a broad range of contemporary design issues, including health, sustainability, well-being, and education. Projects range from the design of AI-powered digital environments to medical task trainers through to new material development, each demonstrating the scope for positive impact through design. Underpinning all the work is a human-centered design process that seeks to develop a deep understanding of human behavior. This process is central to the way our students work and informs the design of meaningful solutions that are grounded in real-world needs. We have decided to group the projects into 5 themes tonight. These are play, creating opportunities for playful expression through inclusive and human-centered design. Education, teaching and training, building confidence and creating awareness through design. Material narratives, materials and their stories, where they come from, how we appreciate them, and where they go. Well-being, the 4th theme, designing for physical health and mental well-being. Community, the 5th theme, technology as a catalyst for conversation, participation, and social change. In a moment, we'll show you a short show reel of all the projects. This should give you a good sense of the range and quality of the work produced by the students this year. After that, you will have the opportunity to choose from one of 5 breakout rooms. Each of the breakout rooms is focused on a particular theme and will feature short presentations from students whose work aligns with that theme. The breakout rooms will each be chaired by a lecturer from the product design department who will facilitate discussion and leave time for Q&A after the presentations. But the show reel should give you a good sense of an overview of the projects that have been produced by this year's graduating product and interaction design students. So I'm conscious that's a lot of work to see in a very short time. Here are the 5 themes and the students who will be in each. There's so much work to see. Rest assured that we'll each record each of the breakout rooms and compile that for the ncad.works website. So you can see the other breakout rooms if you miss one and follow it with it later. We're going to open the breakout rooms now.
In this group, the students have designed a range of projects and have been approaching projects and looking at, I suppose, within these projects is different definitions of play. So the students have each tackled this theme and responded differently to needs that humans have for playful expression, from designing for accessibility to designing for public engagement. So you'll see a range of projects looking at facilitating play for people with limb amputations, for children with hemiplegia, for public engagement, adults outdoors, and also then for children. So I hope that you enjoy the range of talks. I'm going to hand over to Anya Carroll, who is going to tell you about her project Combo, which is a modular toolkit to get children outdoors and interacting with nature.
Hi guys, hello, my name is Anya Carroll. I'm really happy to be here with you all today. So I'm a designer who believes that playful design can help improve the world. Through my designs, I'd like to create moments of joy within the everyday. So I'm here today to talk to you about my project Combo. So what is Combo? Well, Combo is a modular toolkit for children. Combo includes a set of tools, a bag to contain them, and a storybook to encourage them to get outside. Combo allows the children to create their own tools to explore with and to get them out interacting with nature. So the theme of play was really, really key to my design process. I knew from the beginning that I wanted to create playful objects. And I think play is a really, really powerful tool for exploring and addressing complex issues. So through my project, I wanted to address the issue of immune development, looking at the rise in autoimmune and allergic diseases in children at the moment. So in order to do this, I had to do a lot of research into immune development, and I spoke to a lot of immunologists and microbiologists, and a quote from my research phase that really stuck with me was, "A safe way to train the immune system is to expose it to less modern environments." So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to create tools to get children out and interacting with nature. So from the beginning, from my research phase, I was chatting to parents, and their input was really key throughout my whole process. I kept coming back to them for consultations throughout about my designs and to get feedback and improvements for them. So this led me to creating prototypes that I was able to give to children to use outdoors. So here you can see I gave it my prototypes to 3 wonderful testers, Dahi, James and Dara, and they went and put them through their paces. From these tests, I got a lot of really good feedback and a lot of critical things that I needed to work on that led me to creating my final design, which is Combo. So the main elements of Combo, there's a bag that contains all the objects and is used for portability. There's also a storybook called Out We Go, which encourages children to get outside, as well as the tools that the kids can use to create their own combinations with. So here you can see an image which include with all the parts in Combo. So we have a bag and everything fits into it. So the kids, all of these parts fit together using the pipe, so the children can create their own tools to get out in the muck with. So here hopefully a GIF will be playing for you guys that shows you some of the sample combinations that you can make using Combo, so with the pipes, action parts, and then the different connectors. So as well as looking at child immune systems, I wanted to look at other things within child development. So Combo is really good for physical movement. It helps with fine and gross motor skills, with coordination and gaining mastery. It's a non-directive play thing, so it encourages independence and creative play. The child gets to be the creator and decides how the tools are used. This encourages logic skills such as problem solving, critical thinking, spatial awareness. It's applicable to a wider range than 2 to 3 years old, which was my original age group. And can be used by siblings as they grow together, promoting sharing and team building skills. So thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions about Combo, you can put them in the message box below and I can answer them after the panel. And if you'd like to learn more about Combo, it's up on the NCAD Works website now. Thank you.
Thanks, Anya. So as Anya said, we'll be opening up questions and answers at the end of this. So we've one of the more full sessions. So I'll go straight over to our next speaker, who is Cian O'Connor, and he's going to tell you about his project Limpact, which is a limb impact protector for amputee football players. So over to Cian.
Yep, how are you doing all? Hi, my name's Cian, and this is my project Limpact. As a designer, I aim to design for the minorities and the communities that have been left behind and forgotten about. The task I was posed with is, how can I enhance the performance of an amputee footballer? Limpact, an amputee limb protector, is how I tackle this task. Amputee football is an adapted version of the sport we all love. All outfield players are leg amputees and use crutches, and goalkeepers are arm amputees and don't use crutches. The problem from research was that there is no requirement in the sport to protect the player's residual limb, but there is a requirement to protect the standing leg. There is also nothing on the market offered to protect amputees' limbs during sport. Players also mentioned how big of an issue this was, as if they get a knock on their residual limb, this could then prevent them from wearing the prosthesis. Here are some of my sketches around the concept. After deliberations, CAD models and FMEAs, I got to my final design. Here is the sketch. As I wanted to create a final finished prototype, my process was extensive. From CNC molds to vac form molds, I created many different styles and finishes. Throughout the design process, testing the prototype on amputees was essential, as changes to the style and size was ever changing. Specialist guidance along the way was key, as these panel of experts helped with feedback and critiques. Here are my two final working prototypes side by side. The device is to be worn straight onto the limb and tightened by a strap above the amputee's knee to keep it in position during exercise. Limpact protects the main two areas on the residual limb, the stump bottom and the shin. These are the areas that have been most affected in amputee football. Limpact is a limb impact protector that protects during football from impacts from a crutch or other players' legs. As amputee football is a very physical game, impacts occur very often. Here are the sizes of Limpact, modelled off existing stump liners on the market. The feedback on Facebook from the amputee community was amazing. Here are just some of the many positive comments I received. One major insight from feedback was demand. People wanted this and they wanted it now. I believe that Limpact has made an impact, and this was solidified by a mother of a 9-year-old who desperately wanted this for her son. Thanks all for listening, and here is Limpact. Cheers, thanks very much.
Thank you, Cian. Again, we'll take questions at the end, but if you have any questions as you go, feel free to put them into the chat. So next we're going to hand it over to Browan Brennan, whose project is titled Affording Play. And in her project, she's created a series of public furniture designed that considers the needs of both children and adults and affords them with opportunities to play in the public setting. So I'll hand you over to Browan now.
Thanks, Emma. So hopefully you can all see that. Hi, my name is Browan, and this is my final year project. I am a designer who strives to create real change in the world, to improve the quality of life for future generations, and to make a positive, long-lasting impact. So this is Block. Block is the collective name for 7 playful public furniture design structures, and the aim of Block is to create more non-prescriptive and enriching play opportunities, and these opportunities are not limited to just playgrounds. So from my research, I found that playgrounds are overly prescriptive. They censor children's imagination rather than support them. Not only is play limiting, but it's limited to very small areas of our cities and urban environments, and public infrastructure doesn't take into consideration the needs of children as users. So my concept was inspired by simple geometric modular shapes, and I decided to bring them to life through cardboard modeling. So I created different forms out of cardboard, and I laser cutted them and glued them together. I conducted some user testing, and I even had the opportunity to test with my main user group, children. I also designed this moving bench. It is an object that the user can maneuver to adapt the space to their needs. It can be turned in any direction and can also be aligned with other objects in the same space. So I created scale models from blue foam, and I experimented with form and configuration, and this was the result. So there are 7 objects in the block range, and each piece has its own unique name. The structures can be attached together in a number of different ways. The range in size and shape ensures a playful experience, no matter how big or small the space. And although there are many different environments and contexts where these objects could be used, some possible contexts include parklets or city squares. Another application could be filtered permeability. So that means filtering traffic on streets to create more attractive environments for walking and cycling. And also just along laneways or paths where opportunities for play are limited. So finally, all of these objects belong to the brand Block. Block has a catalogue where the buyer can read about the brand. It also includes information about the products, the names and their dimensions. And finally, it outlines possible configurations, colors and materials, and how the process of applying, buying and installing works. And if I go on to the next slide, part of the process includes a consultation. If the buyer is interested in purchasing the product, they can discuss with the company the optimum products and configurations for the space and the user group. And in an attempt to introduce play into this consultation process, I have designed small scale models that can be used to bring the idea to life, because I've learned how important co-creation is in the design process. So thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them after we're done. Thank you.
Thank you, Rowan. So next up is Adam Pelosi, who is going to talk about his project, The Bubble, which is a compact and minimalist shelter to give you a carefree way to explore. So over to Adam next.
Thank you, Darla. I presume everyone can see that. So hi everyone, welcome to our presentation. My name is Adam Pelosi. I'm a designer who believes that you should be able to explore and develop ideas to their full potential, no matter where it may lead you. So for my final year project, I have designed and produced a wilderness shelter named The Bubble. The reason I have chosen this idea is because I wanted to design a shelter that is quick and easy to both carry and put up with the least amount of effort. I chose to design The Bubble because of my many years of experience of camping and hiking with scouts, friends and family. Usually on organized camping trips, I would have a lot of heavy equipment. Therefore, I designed The Bubble for those spontaneous trips where I can easily just take to the hills. I was inspired by the older tents that I have used in Scouts that are made from natural materials, such as the Icelandic tent. The material I chose in the end was the cotton canvas, the type that is used on these Icelandic tents. I used an industrial sewing machine to make the bubble and highlight the folds, add peg straps, and made 2 of them adjustable. I designed the bag and the pole to give you more freedom whilst exploring. The reason why I designed the bubble this way with the natural materials and in this traditional style of tent is because I wanted to bring it back to a more basic style of camping where one is more in touch with nature and the surrounding environment. The experience I wanted with using the bubble is one of exploration, where you can be free to roam the wilderness and to cut yourself off from the chaos of city life in an easy, carefree way. The aim behind my idea is to have the ability to be able to just take the pack up my shelter and take it off on a last minute journey without the hassle of having to organize equipment. To get inspiration for my design, I looked up the nomadic lifestyle, as this is a way of life that gives you freedom to roam the wilderness and not having the stress of today's society weigh you down. It is a carefree way to explore. This is my ultimate goal for the bubble. To test out the bubble, I went out into the Dublin Mountains. I went hiking to test the weight of the bubble, my equipment, and the durability of the bag. I wanted to get a feel for the different use of the pole as a hiking stick and a bag carry. I found that this worked best in both situations. To set up the shelter, it was quick and easy with only 6 pegs and 1 pole and 1 guideline. This made it easy to assemble, and my stitchings lasted throughout the night, keeping me sheltered from the elements. Overall, I was extremely pleased with the bubble. It met all my end goals. It was compact, lightweight, quick and easy to assemble, and gave me the freedom to explore without being weighed down. Thank you very much. If you want to find out any more, you can find it on the NCAD Works website.
Thank you, Adam. So we have our final speaker tonight is Brian Conway, and he's going to be talking about his project Gamepad, which is a modular controller that assists gamers with cerebral palsy. So I'll hand over to Brian now.
Cheers, thanks, Emmett. So yeah, that's all good. So how's it going? My name is Brian. I'm in product design, and for me, design is looking for the interesting alternative. And my main interests lie in form and function and consumer electronics design. So my main project is, if it will actually go to the next slide, there we go. So it's an acronym for personal assistive device, and Gamepad is a modular controller which allows children with hemiplegia to adapt to their needs and unlock their potential. So the problem I'm ultimately tasked with is that children with hemiplegia and other disabilities don't get the same level of enjoyment out of playing video games as able-bodied users would. So cerebral palsy is one of the most common disabilities in childhood, and hemiplegia is a form of that which affects the motor abilities in their arm and leg on one side of their body. So that severely affects their ability to play video games. And so for me, playing video games was always a form of escapism for me. So to think that there's children out there who can't achieve this is quite heartbreaking to me. And this then became my motivation for the project. And so I did a lot of research interviewing multiple experts in the field, such as occupational therapists, people in assistive technology areas, and also the gaming community. And I also interviewed Liam Maloney, who was 12 years old and has low level hemiplegia, and he loved playing video games. And he became a really good asset during the design process. And so my aims then became to design a controller that's ergonomic, adaptable, able to be played anywhere, and inclusive and accessible. And so the development process went through multiple levels of fidelities, from working with foam and other bits of plastic, and then it ultimately leveled with 3D printing, as 3D printing was a really good way to get accurate models. And I was able to get a really good sense of scale and how Gamepad would end up looking in a physical way. But with my final design of Gamepad, I decided to go completely digital due to COVID restrictions. But with that, I was able to excel in my abilities with 3D modeling with CAD and rendering. So Gamepad comes in two parts. First are the modules, which is an array of controller functions from a PlayStation controller. And each one contains a USB-C male port, which then connects to a female port on the board here, which has an array of them on the front. And so the user will then be able to place the modules at any point on the board to adapt to their specific needs, depending on what severity of hemiplegia or other different disabilities that they have. And so this is just an example of the different scenarios that they can create with their controller. So this can either be through general playing or else through different types of specific games as well. So the Gamepad also has RGB lights on the side, which can change into the different colors that they want. And this adds another layer to the inclusivity and personalization of Gamepad. And so the ultimate goal of Gamepad is that it can be played in any different scenario or environment, such as on a bed, at a desk, on a sofa, on a table, or even on your lap. And this is in comparison to an existing solution, which is the Xbox Adaptive Controller, which you can see here is quite messy and requires such a large surface area to set up. And I think that Gamepad brings such a different type of benefit from this. So with Gamepad, I would love to see this become a real thing, as children with disabilities deserve to be able to play video games with as much enjoyment as able-bodied users. So that's Gamepad. Thanks very much for listening. And if you want to check the rest of the project, go on to ncad.works or else my website, conwayscreations.com. Cheers.
Thank you, Brian, and thanks to our five panelists, our five students, and congratulations again to all of them on completing the degree. So I'm just posting into the chat there just a link to the NCAD Works website and also our product design Instagram handle if you want to check out any of their work there. They're going to be continuing to post more about each of their projects over the coming weeks. So now I'd like to open it up to a Q&A. We are ahead of time, amazingly. I think we're supposed to finish up at 22. So we have about 15 minutes or so for some Q&A. So if anybody wants to, feel free to, you can ask questions by either speaking or typing them into the chat, and I can call them out from there.
I could ask a question, because it's always good to keep asking questions at these sorts of things. But first of all, I just want to say well done, because it's really great to see all this work. I should say I'm working at college. I'm a lecturer in the communication design department, but I'm blown away by the work. So well done to all the students for showing everything. And I guess the thing that I'm really interested in is that initial research stage with all these projects, where you're connecting with real people in the real world and finding out, what their needs are. And I just kind of interested to know how that process was for different people for your projects. Was it a difficult thing? Was it an easy thing? How did you find the people that you wanted to connect with for your project work? So I don't know if people want to answer that.
I'll try on a quick little answer. So personally, I thought it was a bit easier, because I feel like people were on the computers more. Because everyone was working from home on the laptops and on the phones. If you send an email, normally you might just get missed because people are out, people are doing things. I feel like because of lockdown, people were more responsive over the internet. So I feel like it helped a little bit. And then also getting a meeting or an interview was much easier over Zoom, because it was just as an instant link. It wasn't going out for coffee and the awkward kind of walking into the coffee shop, not knowing who to say hello to and all that sort of stuff. So it was kind of, I think it was easy in a way. Well, it was easier in a way, but also kind of harder in senses.
Yeah, I can kind of agree with what Cian is saying there. Like for my project, I was able to speak to people from all over the world, like people in San Francisco, in Finland, and the UK, which I probably wouldn't have been able to interview them if it actually wasn't for COVID times, or So and also like I think people are really happy to help you, especially when they've been in the situation yourself. Like a lot of the parents that I contacted had done like research projects for their degrees, so they were really, really willing to give me time, which I was really, really happy for. And also lovely tutors as well from college. So yeah, it was really good actually to be able to get that online interaction from people.
Yeah, I'll chime in as well on that. In terms of my project, I found it really good to get interviews with people, similar to what Cian said. It was really simple to get an interview with someone just through firing them an email and they'll respond to you within a day. So that was really, really good. But in terms of getting like one-to-one user interactions, I found that quite difficult to do, especially with my one being that cerebral palsy and hemiplegia is defined in such a young age. It was hard to get in contact with people, and I was only lucky to get in contact with one person, and that was actually done through an expert that I interviewed. So I was super, super lucky. If I didn't interview that expert, I probably wouldn't have gotten through to a user at all. So there was definitely some difficulties with COVID, but it also had its advantages, which is quite surprising considering what COVID is,
Great.
Thanks, Philip. It's definitely a good question, and I think they did. The students all blew us away with the amount of research that they were able to do, and not just research and interviewing people, but also then, I suppose, as things changed and got kind of, I suppose, less risky to be out in the community, they were able to actually meet with people outdoors and evaluate things in a safe, kind of COVID-friendly way. So they did exceptional work. I suppose I wanted to ask you guys about the theme of play. All your projects have been brought together under this theme, and some of them are the more obvious forms of play for children, and some of them are the less obvious forms of play. I wanted to know what your thoughts were on maybe design and the play within the design process, and do you think that play is an aspect of design?
Yeah, I'll jump in onto this one. Personally, I think play is so important to all aspects of life and for all age groups. Like even I wrote my thesis on play as well. So this is probably like a loaded question because I'm very biased to having play in the design process and also just in life in general. I think it's really important within the human experience and to have a happy life, to be able to play. So I think it's something that kind of factors in, like designing and creating, to me, is a form of play. It's exploring, it's drawing, it's sketching, it's testing, it's just trying things and failing. And I think when you're a kid, that's what you do through play. You learn key skills through trying and failing in forms of play. So I think it's really, really key throughout all aspects of life, and especially in the creative field. I think it's an important aspect of it that can often be underrepresented or underthought about, I suppose.
I'll just chime in after you, Anya, and build upon that. This is the first project that I've done that is kind of around play, and I kind of never really, I have such like a new appreciation for it now, especially when I got to do user testing, and I just saw people's reactions to my objects and the way they use them, and like the happiness and the enjoyment that people got from testing my objects was so fulfilling, and it just kind of underlined how important play is for me, and it's exciting to be moving forward with this kind of new outlook.
Maybe to build upon that question, if anybody has any maybe examples of do they apply any playful methodologies or approaches in different stages or different aspects of the design process? Is there anything kind of, I suppose, tangible or any examples you could give to the audience?
Again, I suppose for me, when I start creating, my brainstorms would be quite playful because I just really let myself go wild and think of everything and put no limitations on it. And when I'm struggling to think of ideas, I'll make little pots with different words in them and then pull them out and then have to think of something to put together. to come up with another idea, or to really like push the boundaries of ideas. And also like I really love making, so like if you put a bag of clay in front of me, I just spend all day just going at it. So for me, that process of learning through making and actually just trying things out and putting some things together and seeing what happens, it's like almost like Lego. Like give me 2 cardboard tubes and I'll just go see what I can make with it. So I think that kind of element, I always try bring play into my process for exploration and for really pushing the boundaries of what you can do with design.
Great, thank you, Anya. I don't have to ask all the questions. Do jump in if anybody else has any questions. So I suppose then maybe just to ask another question then relating to play. I suppose maybe just if you could, does anybody have any thoughts on, you know, play outside of your specific projects and its importance? You know, is there, I suppose, yeah, why is play important to design for?
I would say like with play in design, like it's such an important part, I would say, in terms of just getting enjoyment out of design. Like a lot of people would view design nowadays like as such a straightforward blank thing that they'd be like, oh yeah, that was just designed for someone to sit on a chair. But it's a lot more than that. Like it's such a good idea to bring in play because it just adds more depth to what a design really means, and it adds more function to what the product is. So like, let's say it's, as an example, like a chair, everyone kind of just makes fun of product designers saying like, oh, you just design a chair all the time. But with a chair, just like if you were to add play to that, it would just become such a more important thing, and it can become such a memorable thing for that user as well. Like, you know, with children, like you'd remember so many things as a nostalgic thing and be like, oh, I used to always play with that thing. Like that person that designed that would have achieved that so well by adding in a playful aspect, and just by achieving that, it's such a good thing, really. And that's why I think play is such an important part of a lot of design nowadays, that it just should be included. Even if it's the smallest thing, it just should be still included somewhat.
I think as well, it can blend into other aspects where I know a lot of our projects were physical, but if you had digital stuff where the screens were very nice to interact, like the noises they can make, how a lot of phones, they still keep the, the music notes from 1 to 9 and stuff, like that's playful. I remember as a kid just playing with those because I had no games on my phone. There's a lot of stuff that goes into just basic interfaces where it doesn't seem like it's put effort in, it's just you're messing around with it, but like that's because they have put tons of effort in to make it as easy as possible, and it's fun to play with it as such.
Yeah, like I think design can often be seen as a really kind of serious thing, especially when you look at different forms of design. It can be like automotive design and stuff like that. Like even the ads for them are usually like pretty intimidating and scary and kind of very, very serious, and don't seem to lend themselves to that kind of a more playful side or that kind of expression. And I think it's, as people get older, we tend to kind of lose that I suppose instinct for play, or we tend to hold ourselves back from it. And I think through design, and we can use design as a tool to introduce play again back into people's lives and to encourage it. And you know, like even with the projects here that we have here, like with like camping and stuff like that, that's a form of play. And playing like football, like it's important to have these forms of expression and to be able to design for them to enable people to feel like it is possible and it is okay and it is allowed. Because I think when you get older and responsibilities happen, play can seem like a non-necessary thing, but I think it is quite necessary for our own mental health and for our own growth and improvement and enjoyment, and to try get the best experience out of life. So I think, yeah, I think like it should be utilized a lot more within design and just in life in general, I think. But as I said, I'm very biased because I'm a big advocate for playing. So I just think it's something that it should be allowed to be expressed. And I think even us now, even as designers, throughout our class, like I think we're quite a playful group in general. And I think it's going to be good seeing the future of design now once play is more of an open thing and more of an allowed, I don't really want to say allowed, but more of a thing that's expressed as people are older.
Brilliant. And I suppose maybe just building on that question, so it's probably going to come back to you answering it, Enya, but as such an advocate for play, and the others here have designed for play as well, how do you think you could go about, you know, this, you said the idea of, you know, adults and maybe, you know, getting them to play or to not take, you know, things so seriously, or see play as being the kind of thing that children do. Have any of you got any thoughts on that? You know, how could you help to make people play more?
I think like the interactions that people don't really maybe associate with play, because I think when you do automatically think of it, you do think of kind of childhood kind of things. But I suppose like a lot of hobbies that people would have would be play, and would like, maybe not everybody would consider football or like sport of some sort an actual form of play, because it seems like it's organized. I suppose it depends, yeah, maybe on the type of play, if you mean organized play or like individual play or kind of self-expression play. I think by, you know, allowing people to express it and telling them that it's okay to go dance down the street, I think that's something like encouraging it would be something that would be able to bring it forward and make it more accessible for everybody, or make it feel like something that people can do as they grow older. And having it, yeah, like Adam was saying, like interactions, having little playful things that are built into everyday objects that will allow you to, you know, have that small little time of play within your day, and that can build to more inspiration and more ambition to find more play within your day, and possibly go out of your way to create time for it.
Yeah, I think I kind of attempted to do that a little bit with my project, bringing like a bit of, I mean, it looks very obviously playful as it is now, but bringing a little bit of play into the objects that I created, and making play in everyday objects more nuanced. So like you as an adult, you don't really feel like you're playing on a moving bench, but you're moving back and forth, or you're pushing someone on it, or you're swinging off it, or whatever it is. It's still a playful moment, or it's a playful interaction, and I got to experience how happy it made people, and that was so exciting. And it's just really, it's an important thing.
I think it's been really interesting to see actually throughout. We've had the most attendees to the play theme, which is really interesting. I'm not sure if part of it is people who know the students or an interest in the theme, but I think that's really nice to see, and maybe that has, you know, something to say about bringing about more change and more play into the world. So thank you everyone for joining us here, and thanks and well done again to the students.
I would like to welcome everybody to the education session of this year's virtual product and interaction design degree show opening event. As the title suggests, we have a group of projects here that have a focus on learning and that have explored how the design of physical or digital products, or combinations thereof, can support learning processes and experiences. Beyond that, though, these projects are all really diverse, as you'll be able to see, because they respond to very different sets of problems experienced by different users and in different situations. These range from dyslexic primary school students learning to read and write in the classroom, to student doctors in hospitals learning how to operate on the human spine, and from secondary school students struggling with online learning to novice users of 3D printers hoping to reduce waste while learning to use this equipment. The projects you're going to see also differ a lot in terms of approaches and outputs. So we have 3 product design graduates here who have designed physical objects, and often also the systems around those objects to support them. And we've got 1 graduate from interaction design who has designed the digital platform and the interactive experiences this facilitates. So this project is entirely screen-based. A feature that unites all of this work also with the projects that are being presented in the other sessions is a deep concern for people and their needs and challenges. This is an aspect of design that is really important to us here in NCAD, and something that we actively try to foster in our students. So it's really great to see this coming out so clearly in our graduates' work. So as tutors, we are so proud of our graduates and the work that they have produced, despite the challenging circumstances and the uncertainties that the pandemic has brought to their educational experience over the last 15 months. It is a real privilege to work with such an engaged bunch of smart, creative and empathetic young people, and we will miss them dearly. So it is with great pleasure and a little bit of sadness that I introduce you now to Adam Barker, Conal Casey, James Comerford and Josh Kelly, who are going to take the floor in succession to present their projects, and will answer any questions from the audience at the end after the fourth presentation. So first up is Adam Barker with Sustainaprint, a solution to help new users of 3D printers to learn to use these without generating excessive waste.
So, hi, I'm Timothy Adam Barker. I'm a designer who likes to care, whether about sustainability or the user first. My favorite type of design is that which I don't know, because I love learning as much as I can so I can make better products. This whole thing began because I thought, how might I create awareness for 3D printed waste while enabling people to manage their waste appropriately? This started because I have a box full of PLA wasted prints that I thought, since it was marketed that way, it would be able to recycle or compost, but you can't do that way either. So I've been holding on to them until I have a better way to dispose of this waste. And through this project, I want to allow other people to successfully dispose their waste as well. Through my research, I did several surveys and I compared them with that of Filamentive, that did a much larger survey. And I found that 90% of 3D print users are self-taught. This means that they're beginners for a long time, they're making a lot of common mistakes, and they don't know exactly where those mistakes are going. And all these mistakes lead to more waste. So if I could make something that undercuts the beginner phase, I'd undercut the amount of waste generated. My solution was Sustainaprint, which is a box that includes all of the above, that allows the beginner to fix or upgrade or troubleshoot their 3D printer and really get to know it and understand it in a better level. The idea is the user would get their first 3D printer, use the basic settings and fail their first print, not knowing why. But after a quick search, they'd find Sustainaprint and be able to buy the box, which contained the guidebook. The guidebook will allow them to easily troubleshoot and fix their printer and fail better. Then with the app that I made alongside, they'd be able to troubleshoot further and record their waste and mistakes so that they can learn from their mistakes. Throughout this, I did 2 rounds of user testing, one with my mate Connor, who's very good at computer science and all things technical. He was given the handwritten guidebook and actually made quite a lot of failures. And after a while, he was able to use the book to get better and make a successful, perfect print. For my second user tester, not so technically minded, but just as hardworking person, I gave the digital version of the guidebook. With this, they were able to succeed every time, however, at varying levels of quality. So what does the guidebook, or what does the app do? It starts off with a sustainable message with tips on how to better print and save yourself money and plastic. It does this through tracking your waste, troubleshooting easily made mistakes, and even browsing for more sustainable filament brands. That's my project, Sustainaprint. Thanks for watching. And if you want to know more about it, you can check it out on my website, adambarkercreations.com, where you can also free download the PDF guidebook. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Adam. It's brilliant. Okay, so next is Conal Casey with Reform, a task trainer for spinal fusion procedures.
Okay, yeah, I'm Conal Casey and I'm in product, and I'm really interested in the likes of human factors and usability, and I'm really into medical device design as well. So for my major project, what I've made is called Reform, and it's a task trainer for spinal deformity surgery to practice spinal fusion specifically. There's quite a lot to unpack in there. It can be difficult to understand exactly what the problem is I'm trying to solve, but just in a nutshell, it allows for control over the positioning and tensioning of a model spine, allowing surgeons to practice before going into actual live procedures. As far as the deformity that this is tackling, most people have heard of a scoliosis, but this task trainer is specifically for kyphosis, which is the forward curvature of the spine. And what the surgeons do with this generally is a spinal fusion. So they install screws along the vertebrae and then 2 rods, and they correct the curvature of the spine. And just in a bit more detail, they're called pedicle screws, so they go into each vertebrae, and then they incrementally lift up the spine to the contour of the two rods using these little metal bits called crickets. And then the crickets are released and you're left with a spine that has the now corrected curvature. So I talked to a lot of surgeons in the process. I went out to Crumlin Hospital, I went out to the Beacon Hospital and out to Blackrock Clinic to talk to consultants. And in talking to them, I kind of came down to the problem that surgeons can't currently practice correcting the curvature of a kyphotic spine outside of the procedure. So originally I thought I'd be kind of competing in a dense market of task trainers for this sort of thing, but I soon found out that there just wasn't any task trainers for this at all. And you're ending up in situations where surgeons were going into practice these surgeries, live surgeries, and that was the first time they actually were hands-on with the equipment. So my response to this is Reform. And I'm just going to bring you through a primary use case. There is a bunch of alternative uses as a platform, being able to swap out the spine, but that's quite a lot of information. So I'm just going to explain the primary use case. So two surgeons would go in, one consultant level and one reg level, and they might look at a X-ray and use the numbers and the calculations of the X-ray to create a patient-specific deformity on the trainer. So they use the handles to determine the positioning, and then the handles at the bottom to tension the spine in place. So then you end up in a situation where they have a patient-specific deformity, and they can start performing a spinal fusion on that model with a pre-installed pedicle screws along it. And it's all about creating a tactility. So they're working against the force of the tendons and the muscles and the stiffness in the spine. And it's really difficult to pull back into position, giving them a realistic experience. So obviously a huge portion of this project was making a working rig. So I'm really into my printing and resin printing and CNC work. And kind of the output of that was being able to make a fully working rig that I could bring into the hospitals to show the consultants. So I brought it into Crumlin as well as the Beacon, and I've had really high level guys look at it, as well as some orthopedic regs who are kind of in the process of learning this surgery. And just to give a bit of detail on the iteration and prototyping that's gone into this. So yeah, that's kind of the output. I was able to bring this in and probably have 6 or 7 consultant level guys look at it in Crumlin. And the general consensus was that this could be a really effective way of teaching this surgery kind of in a safe environment before moving into live procedures. So that's it, thank you. And if you want to look at any of my other stuff, my portfolio website is connellcaseydesign.com.
Thanks, Carl. The next person up is James Comerford with I Can Do, which is a system to support and motivate primary school students, especially those with learning disabilities like dyslexia, learning to learn and write, to read and write.
Hi everyone, so my name is James Comerford, and as you can see, I am interested in helping students with learning disabilities or people with learning disabilities. So my project is aimed at students specifically with dyslexia, and my aim is to encourage them to read more. So the reason as well why I'm doing it is because I also have dyslexia. And I've been diagnosed with dyslexia since I was about 9 years old, and it's impacted my learning through concentration, reading, and taking in information and processing that, and then being able to give back what my thoughts are. So what I've designed is a recognition reward system in the form of a wearable bracelet, and you achieve badges, and you're able to apply these onto your badges to your bracelet with by earning rewards through certain being rewarded by certain categories. So I'm going to share a quick video with you discussing this a bit more. One called I Can Do. To recap, my design challenge was, how can I improve or assist the process of reading for primary school students with dyslexia? So what is it? I Can Do is a goal-oriented recognition system in the form of a wearable bracelet. The achievement of having completed preset goals in reading is recognized through the winning of badges that attach to the bracelet. It's targeted at students between senior infants and 3rd class. Users have indicated that they have very low levels of confidence in their ability to read. Some have even said that they just don't bother because they don't think they can. The design aims to create desirable badges based on iconic symbols relative to particular age groups. These badges become symbols of personal achievement which build confidence in the user and allow them to say, I can do, thereby reinforcing positive affirmation and building the user's confidence. And if you want to find out more, you can find more of my projects at jamescomerford.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. So finally, we have Josh Kelly with Threads, which is a digital platform to support online learning in secondary schools.
So I had a much longer presentation, maybe 45 minutes ago, but in classical fashion, I just decided to cut it down, and I'm going to share a link to the actual platform so you can try it out for yourself, because I think that it was designed so that, you know, it's going to be causing questions as you're using it. So I'll just share my screen and show you the very, very brief presentation that I have made. The name is Threads. I'm probably going to have to change it if I want this to be a real product, because there's no way I'm going to get that domain name. But it's kind of the power of machines with the simplicity of paper. So as Katrina mentioned, my research was revolving around looking at how secondary school students use the internet and reflecting on what the kind of challenges that they have, like the attention problems, like for having 50 tabs open, having such access to such a wealth of information when they don't need so much. So how could we strip that back to like a digital version of paper? And then how could we augment that paper with some, I suppose, magic? So Threads is an exploration of how we can, you know, design minimalist digital environments and AI-powered tools to increase our creative potential, our focus, and then to protect us from the attention-consuming rabbit holes of the internet. So it's designed to be really peaceful, and there's no distractions. It's just you and the page. It's simple, so rather than having, you know, a lot of styling options, a lot of options that are visible, it really reduces what you're able to do so that you're focusing on the content that you're producing. It can also kind of create paragraphs. This is just an example of giving it a few keywords. It's insightful, so, you know, you can give it large bits of complex text and it can summarize it so that it's like a 12-year-old could read it, and it's helpful. So there's an assistant built in, which if I do release this, will have to be changed, because it's not supposed to be able to talk about all the things that it's able to talk about, because it will just make up stuff. But having something that's within the document or within the place that you're working on, without having to go to Google, open a new tab and potentially get lost, that's the point, that you'd be able to ask instant questions. So can you still see my screen?
Yes.
So I just want to share another screen, because I suppose I just have to show the actual thing itself rather than pointing through a lot of things, but it's really, really stripped back, you know, very minimal design. I just have a bit of text that I've prepared here. So all of the things that I was mentioning are available within the document. And rather than having 50 tabs open, you kind of have like these little, you know, side tabs where you're able to copy in and out information. Like I just have Wikipedia and YouTube as an example here. But rather than having like loads of disjointed sessions, you have, you know, your search queries contextualized within the area that you're working. And also the whole focus idea is that, you know, I believe that our technology should really aid us in, you know, focusing. At the moment, we can pretty much just open a new tab or we set a task for ourselves and it's very easy to leave. But with this, the idea would be that, you know, if you tell the technology you're working with that you want to focus on something, it should support that choice. So here you still have access to all of the tools, but again, it's just about removing what's unnecessary. So I'm going to just share a link. I don't mind the nature of the link. It's just hosted on Firebase. It's very safe. It's not going to infect your computer or anything dangerous like that. But you can have a go of it yourself in your own time, and you know it's going to raise questions like, I suppose, when the idea of the calculator being introduced in the classroom came about, like, should it be? Is it going to make us stupid? So is it going to make us stupid, or is it going to, you know, unlock a new level of abstraction and thought? So that's my project. And if you want to view my portfolio, it's at joshua.ie. I know, Ross, you've probably seen my portfolio, but that's all I have to say. It's very simple.
Thanks, Josh. Okay, great. So at this point, we have some time. We're really well in time, actually. We can run until 5 to 8 if you like. And so we have an opportunity now to ask some questions. So if anybody in the audience has any questions or comments, it will be a good time to ask them. You can either unmute yourself if that's possible. I might have to unmute you. not sure, or type them into the chat or whatever you like. Do we have anybody here? Or you can raise your hand.
Yeah, well, firstly, well done to everybody. Really impressive range of projects there, and really nicely resolved and very well presented as well. So well done to everybody, and should be proud of what you've achieved.
Thanks. So there's no question coming after that, no?
Not yet.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'll start off, sure. Yeah, well done, everyone. Really fantastic, and again, just like Don was saying, fantastically presented as well. Really great stuff. I guess just because it's the last one there, Josh, I guess I'll ask you first. How did you end up building it, the project?
Well, because text is a very complex thing to work with. It's not like a click-through form where I could like easily prototype the screens. I felt like to be able to work with text, I had to build something. So I built basically the whole thing in Vue, and it has a server running in the background that then speaks. I didn't build the AI myself. It's called GPT-3, which the way I like to think about, or the way I explain GPT-3 to people is like if the internet had a voice, it would be that language model. It's the biggest language model that exists. It's trained on like 175 billion parameters, cost millions to make, but it's really kind of uncanny. You know, so I tried to put it in a context where you're able to see that this is actually the level that AI is at, and how easily that we could develop tools now that aren't so hidden, because AI is obviously has a big influence on how society is working now, but it's very much clandestine, and like managing how the algorithms that are, you know, helping my voice come across clearly to you, or, you know, the recommendations that you get on YouTube, or, you know, how your Amazon package gets delivered. But I wanted to, you know, see how could it something be more visible, and kind of see what questions came up from that and what concerns people would have.
Cheers, looking forward to trying it out.
Same here. I might have a question there for Conal, maybe. Conal, does the project, your project, does it have any implications for the design of medical devices more generally for training or otherwise? Was there any learnings that you could take forward you think might apply across?
Just, I think the idea of simulating stuff on its own, or just simulation in general, is really interesting. It's something they use quite on like the lower levels of medical education, like as a nurse or as a doctor coming in your first few years, and you're just doing general medicine. Most of their learning is through these simulated experiences. But as you sort of kind of go up the ranks, and as you specialize, especially in spine stuff, there just doesn't seem to be any simulation stuff for task trainers there. Most of the learning is through the apprenticeship model or cadavers. And I suppose with the timing of my project, kind of what I identified was they do a lot of this learning through the apprenticeship model, where they do little bits at a time, and they have essentially no access to cadavers because of COVID, they couldn't use the cadavers. And as well with cadavers, you don't really get a cadaver that has a specific deformity. You kind of get what you get. So they were very good for practicing putting in screws, but I kind of identified that actually manipulating the spine and understanding the tactility of how that works, there wasn't much experience beyond being in the actual surgery.
Are there other procedures that where this might come in handy, do you think, or have you come across any? Maybe you haven't.
I don't know. I'm really interested in limb lengthening stuff. I find that really interesting. The surgeons I talked to, at least anyway, were definitely recommending for me to look into that. But spine stuff is huge by itself. So they do anterior approaches to spine stuff as well, where rather than coming in through the back, they'll come in through the chest. So equally, my trainer would be accurate for something like that. You just flip the spine around and then use it the same way. But yeah, spine stuff is huge, especially like lumbar stuff as well. There's a lot of disc simulations you could build onto the same platform.
Thank you. Anybody, anything on that?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what you talked about there, the patient-specific, configuration of the spine. Is there a possibility to, say basically with using MRI scans to output into a 3D printer that you could actually, so rather than actually just the configuration, you're creating 3D prints of a person's actual vertebrae?
Yeah, that is pretty huge industry in America, actually, is these custom 3D printed spines. It's really standard practice, especially in especially in America. They'll, especially with scoliosis cases, they'll use a custom 3D printed spine, and then the doctors will use that for their pre-op planning. So equally, again, what I'm trying to sell Reform as is that it isn't just a single simulation, it's a platform that you can do many simulations on. So equally, you could install a custom 3D printed spine on it if you wanted a really, really accurate simulation.
And is there a possibility to simulate, the musculature and vasculature as well, and innervation, all of those types of elements, that you're creating a wet model essentially that is that's very kind of replicating the operational scenario?
Yeah, you could do, and early on in my research, that's kind of the way I was heading. I was looking into simulating veins and nerves, but with the nature of orthopedic stuff, because generally you do not want to put your hands on the patient. You're always holding tools. So the sort of stuff that having wet model would kind of incorporate, like the simulated experience of like your hands being slippy because there's blood and it's a difficult thing to be hands on with, doesn't apply so much with the orthopedic stuff because you're using tools that are way out here. So it's quite mechanical. It's like workshop work, I've always said.
Ross, do you want to ask a question verbally?
Sorry?
Yeah, I was just going to ask about the 3D printed spines. Can they be reused during like the test operations, or are they just a once off and they're done?
That was again, yeah, something I was kind of the crutch of my project was that the way they do it currently, I didn't have time to show all the different ways they do it at the minute, but they use these spines called sawbone spines, and the focus is really on realistic bone density simulation. So a hard outer wall and a soft inner wall, and then learning how to put in the screws. But they're always loose. It's always just a model spine by itself that doesn't have any context, like it's not contextualized within like muscle groups or tendons. So a big approach of my project was giving them a spine that was reusable. They could do the simulation again and again, because what they do with the sawbone spines would be they'd put in the screws and they'd do a fusion, but then they would throw it out because you can't use it twice. So yeah, a huge part of my project was the fact that they were single use, and I was creating a simulation that was reusable.
That's great. Thanks.
Okay, I have a question.
You can always use Sustainer print to make sure that there's no wastage.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So I was going to say, I have a question for James. James, I know that you started with the aim of designing something specifically for students with dyslexia, and then you've ended up designing something that really can be used by all students, right? It's something we call universal design. And I know that you weren't always sure that it was the right direction, the best approach for you. How do you feel about that now?
I think it's nice that it's universal. I think it definitely opens up the idea for maybe people can use it. So I feel glad about it. I feel I'm not complaining. To realize to aim for a goal that was, or for a specific group of people, that turns out that actually this system could be used in multiple different areas. The same principle can be applied to different sorts of systems. I think that I'm really happy about that, actually. That's the answer to your question.
Yeah, and do you think that was the best way forward for students with dyslexia?
I think so, yes. Yeah.
What benefits do you think it gave them?
I think it gave them a bit more freedom and maybe a bit more independence and choice. Because part of the system that I've designed is that the students have a choice in what they want to improve and encourage on. Yes, the aim is to improve reading that I've specifically done, but with dyslexia, the student has a bit more choice in whether they want to focus a bit more on their consistency and how much reading they do a week or a day. And then I think the choice element has definitely benefited the students' ability to read more.
Anything else on James's project there?
I have a question for Adam there. No one else. I'm just wondering, and I might have missed it actually, but just because there's a million different types of printers out there, from resin to extruder printer types and stuff, and even within them there's loads. So I was just wondering, was Sustainaprint designed for one printer specifically, or like at least for now, or is it like printer agnostic and can be applied to different types of printers?
I actually specifically made it for FDM printers because they make up the majority. With plans to do other printers, but that's the only printer I own, so it's kind of what I know. The whole thing around it was that 3D printing is becoming more popular. It's in the early adoption phase, So soon it'll be like TV, you know, people just have it. But the learning process is a bit difficult, and there's no one to kind of hold your hand. It's all just kind of YouTube videos and forums at the moment. So this was kind of a way to get all of the people that are going to get into 3D printing a step up.
Yeah, and I can imagine you can have lots of kind of community feedback built into the system as well. Like on your app, people can put their own tips and stuff. Cool, thanks.
And Adam, your project was quite different from the other guys here in that your user group was quite, you know, it wasn't as defined. So it was quite diverse in terms of age and prior educational experience. So do you think that that made your project more difficult or easier to do?
I was kind of going with just proximity due to the lockdowns, but it was definitely good to see, you know, what one person thought was very intuitive, another person thought needed a lot more explanation. So there was a big difference between my handwritten and digital guidebooks, and that, you know, that was the big help, getting different feedback.
So that's how you cope with that sort of the diversity of users. You gave your printer to different people to test, right?
Yeah, my printer went hopping around, but it came back all in one piece.
And Josh, just to ask, because both you and James are talking about education, primary, secondary school education, did you come across different learning models as well in your research? And if so, were you able to accommodate that in your design? Or was that not such a big concern?
Yeah, it wasn't, I suppose, I was more focusing on the kind of universal design aspect, and these are looking at problems that seem to affect students across the board rather than selecting a specific user group. After testing, I did a test with pedagogical expert, and they told me that this would probably be really suitable for, let's say, people with ADHD or attention deficit problems. But again, I was seeing these, like a lot of the research that it was based on, I was seeing this across the board as kind of very common problems. And then even with, I did a lot of testing with adults in the early stages as well. But I wasn't so much concerned with, you know, the different styles of learning. Obviously, this is a very biased towards a writing tool at the moment, and helping, you know, language. It's not engaging any of the other styles of learning, like through video or through touch, or it's not tactile. It's literally just focused on text. Mm-hmm. At the moment.
Ross, are you asking the question there again? Yeah.
No, sorry, I'm not asking a question. I'm just noodling around with thread in the background here. Really nice. I love just the transitions, even just in all the pop-ups and stuff. That's really nicely made.
Yeah, I think a lot of focus was given to like the learnability of it, because these are new tools that you wouldn't be using in your workflow as it is now. Like there was a lot of attention. It's essentially like an interactive animation for like 8 minutes. There was so much. A lot of my time was actually consumed in that little bit, which is just the intro, because it's amazing how people can, you know, when I was giving it to people without any kind of context, they were say, oh, this is nice, and they could get a basic understanding. But then I felt that I really needed to show them, you know, this is what it can actually do, and you know, then their imagination, then seeing them use the document afterwards, or using the thread afterwards, the experience was totally different. That was actually quite a hard thing to design, because people can break things so easily.
Yeah, well, it helps when you make a nice looking tutorial anyway. It makes people want to do it. So well done.
Is there a voice recognition element to Josh? Can you
yeah, well, you can speak to it, like when I don't have it so to the point where it's but you can't like just write, it can't do speech to text, but it can do it into the little, if you open a little assistant, you can just ask questions directly into it and then press enter.
Yeah, because there's a lot of interesting stuff about you know, ability to detect stress levels through voice recognition, and that associated with education, and you know, basically being able to determine, you know, mood and attention and those kinds of things. Might be interesting to, you know, if that was an aspect of it.
There was a lot of, I did quite a bit of research into the whole voice algorithms that can detect stress and people with really high accuracy, but again, there's a lot of bias in those. And also I was kind of moving away from design that would be, you know, nudging people based on this biometric data. I really wanted to create something that was very visible. You were seeing how it was being used, and it wasn't going to be like, I don't know, that I just feel like that kind of makes me a bit uneasy, the voice recognition stuff, because your insurance broker can just call you up and then, you know, tell a lot of things about your health by just your voice, you know. So I didn't want to move into that territory. Like, but I did do a lot of research into it, but it was just a kind of a personal choice about what kinds of tech I wanted to be involved in making.
Yeah. So Sarah has a question here for James.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, what did you make the bracelet from in the end?
Then the bracelet was made of silicone, and I had to try a variant, several different types of silicone to get the correct elasticity from it. So if you got it too elastic, it could snap, or if you got it too firm, it wouldn't be a nice, smooth feel, because it's supposed to be based off, you know, those kind of, you might get them at festivals, or you might get them at events like wristbands with like text on it. It's going to be similar enough as a good starting point from it, but I had little holes in them that where the badges would go into, but it's from silicone, it's made from silicone.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
I'd like to welcome you. We're Material Narratives with John McCarthy and Nicholas Feinsteckers. And their group is about materials and their stories, where they come from, how we appreciate them, and where they go. And what they say is that this theme aims to challenge the preconceived notions we have about materials, their sources, their value, and their potential use in products. We're going to see two projects tonight presented by Nick and John. Their projects 27 Degrees and Calcos revolve around two materials with deep roots in Irish history. Their work examines how we might appreciate and value an out-of-sight metal and industrial stone waste by re-evaluating them in a contemporary context. Both these projects adopted a design process that was focused on gaining a deep understanding of materials through experimentation, site visits, and working with materials. Nick, we might kick off with your presentation, followed by John, and then we'll go to a bit of a discussion after that.
Sure. Cool. Does that come up?
Great.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Nicholas Feinsteckers. I'm a designer who's sort of fascinated with the little things, where and how the objects that we surround ourselves with come from, where they're made, how they sort of impact us, and how the connection between human and object can be enriched through like a deeper appreciation of where they came from and how they were made. So yeah, 27 Degrees is a collection of objects made from waste produced by the Irish slate mining industry, exploring how designers can collaborate with indigenous industries to take part in a more circular production process. This project was realized in collaboration with Valentia Slate Quarry down in County Kerry to explore potential applications for their waste material. Valentia Slate Quarry provided Europe with really high quality slate for over 200 years. During the 1850s, the quarry employed up to 500 workers and built up a world-renowned name for their quality product. Valentia slate was used extensively during the construction of the great municipal buildings in London during the mid-19th century. These included the Houses of Parliament, Westminster Abbey and Cathedral, St. Paul's Cathedral, and many of the underground railway stations. However, with the cheaper and softer Welsh slate coming onto the market, a decline set in at Valentia, and a rock fall at the mouth of the mine sort of restricted access, so the mine had to close in 1911. But the quarry was reopened again in 1999 under new ownership, but a lot of the tradition and knowledge had died out after 88 years of inactivity. So in recent years, the quarry has sort of been taking a lot of active steps to try to modernize and their sort of production and their extraction by recycling water or finding alternative uses for the stone they don't use, or the stone that sort of goes to waste. The process of extracting slate is just essentially a series of sawing operations. So it's sawn out from the wall and moved over to a really large wire saw, that sort of blocks them out into their rough dimensions to a workable size. And then it's sort of passed down an assembly line of smaller saws up until the polishing or like sandblasting process. Every step of this process requires some sort of lubricant or water to keep the blades cool and to catch all of the airborne dust that's produced. So this ultimately ends up with the ground of the quarry is completely covered in this like slate mud or slate slurry that's just a combination of really fine stone dust and water. So this is what when I went to visit there and I sort of watched the process, I learned that this dust doesn't actually have any sort of established waste stream. There's stuff set up for the offcuts and the sort of the unusable parts of slate that they would usually use for their client projects. They have, but they don't have anything set up for this waste dust, and it can actually be really harmful for the surrounding like flora and wildlife. So I decided to take this slate dust and go through sort of like a rigorous material exploration project, testing out different binders and how does heat affect it? How strong does it make it? Can it be treated like a ceramic? So I went down this whole rabbit hole of wanting to slip cast it, and I ultimately ended up with running into this material, sodium silicate, which is commonly used in slip casting ceramics, which sort of allows the clay slip to be more fluid without needing to introduce too much water. And unexpectedly, this ended up being a really cool, really good binder for this, besides a really, really slow drying time. So yeah, after this experimentation, I reached a sort of geopolymer that can be cast into three-dimensional shapes. And I used this to, with a sort of really rigorous form exploration process, which, because of the limited use of the workshop in college, I ended up relying on VR modeling and sort of modeling at home and 3D printing and stuff to sort of explore what the possibility was. I started all of my form exploration with a 27-degree angle, which is the angle of which the slate vein on the eyelid lies. So I thought it'd be interesting to have that as a starting point for whatever I was going to make, as well as it was a starting point for the material itself. So yeah, 27 degrees serves as an example of how designers can collaborate with indigenous industries to challenge our preconceived notions about industrial waste, and utilize sustainability and craftsmanship together to create a high value product. The ornamental has traditionally been unsustainable. And I think if this could change, if we shifted our desire to extract finite materials to utilizing those which already exist. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. That was great. Really good and lovely to see that presentation again. We might just jump to John and then come back to a discussion after that.
So yeah, I'm John McCarthy, and I'm a designer who's driven by my interest in stories, our connections to the past and their impact in the future. I view the work and products I've made as ways to tell a narrative and the challenge I've used. And CalCoast is my major project, and it's a collection of products that explore and celebrate copper. Copper has been extracted and used in Ireland for thousands of years. It's one of our oldest materials with deep historical and cultural significance. Today is an integral material in our modern world, yet it is often passed by unnoticed, remaining a hidden material that we really think little about. My process has been about uncovering this historic and contemporary story of copper and physically experimenting with copper myself to fully understand the material. So, I did a lot of experimenting with patinas and annealing and hammering and at the same time talking to archaeologists and historians and visiting copper mine and talking to copper workers and so on. And my final outcomes are kind of informed by this long story. Calculus consists of 3 products, each of which engages with a different key property of copper. The collection as a whole brings copper into the center of a home and one's daily routine, which is different to the kind of removed and hidden spaces copper currently occupies. So inside walls, beneath the ground, high up on roofs, and in our phones and devices. Drawing copper to the forefront of our lives and giving it a personally engaging function puts emphasis on its unique qualities and itself as a material. Sunlight blue is the first object of the collection. It uses copper's unique green-blue patina to measure the passage of the days of the week. Copper's natural patina has long been used by architects and buildings for its durability, as its patina is highly resistant to corrosion and weathering. Sunlight blue consists of a copper plate, and as each day passes, the copper plate slowly turns blue. In this way, Sunlight blue creates a weekly routine and ritual as the user marks the passage of the days of the weeks by continually applying and moving a finish to the copper. Hemera Pure is the second object, and it uses copper's antibacterial properties to purify 5 liters of water over a 24-hour period. Humans have long used this unique property of copper to purify water far before we understood the concept of microbes and bacteria. Hemera Pure brings an ancient use of copper into a modern context and form. It aims to foster a material-focused ritual around the integral daily necessity of drinking water. The final object of the collection is incandescence. It uses conductivity to time the passage of an hour. Conductivity is the most used property of copper today, with 60% of copper usage being implemented through electrical wiring. Inspired by the workings of an hourglass, incandescence uses heat transferred by copper to melt a bowl of wax, which slowly drips down to a lower bowl. This process takes 1 hour to complete. Incandescence creates a calming analog ritual around the timing of an hour, aiming to create a more personal and meaningful use of this highly functional material. The collection aims to make us reflect on how we consider, view, and value copper. It aims to show how we can form closer relationships to our materials by using one that is more often than not obscured or seen at a distance during everyday life. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Nick. They're lovely projects and on a strikingly similar path, but you know, a great path of exploration. This can be open to everyone here to put in questions, but I suppose initially from me, I'm interested in that kind of sense of place. Both of you visited holes in the ground in the southwest of Ireland and managed to brave a lockdown to get there. How important was that sense of place in informing how the projects emerged?
I guess I'll go first. Well, with my project, it's the place is a very big part of the identity. I guess it's I guess the Valencia slate can't come from anywhere else except for Valencia, and it's has many characteristics that sort of do differ it, make it different from other sources of slate throughout Europe. So I think and it was sort of nice how it sort of came up unexpectedly. I didn't go to the quarry looking to do a project there or with them. I sort of went there as a tourist and then started thinking like, oh, this is something cool could be done here. I originally wasn't, thinking of, oh, the dust, I'm going to do something with this dust. It was originally with like just when I visited there, they had these big piles of the slate outside that they said they weren't using. So I was thinking, oh, could there be something done with that, the waste slate out there? And then after visiting again and speaking with the owner and speaking with the miners there, I said, this is this waste dust is a much more, I guess, niche or like specific waste source that I managed to identify. So place is a really strong part of the characteristic of my project, I think. that's why the title of it is 27 degrees, because that's, you know, it's very specific to Valencia slate mine as well.
Yeah, how about your end, John?
So I guess for me, it's a bit different. Mine isn't as tied to location, but at the sort of research stage of my project, I visited Allihies mine in the peninsula. And at that stage, I was a big part of the project. I went there and I went down. It's been closed for a long time, but I guess for me and where the project ended up, in the sense of the impact, like learning about the stories that are revolved around that mine. So how the town depended on it, and how each part of the community interacted with the mine, and all the processes of extracting the copper, and the stories of the people working in the mine. You know, gaining a sense of all these stories around this material in this one location of Ireland has an impact in, I guess, the storytelling of the project, and how I'm trying to frame copper as, you know, a material we should think about more, and that has had relevance, and it has this long history, and you know, we have this long history with it. So yeah, I guess it's different from Nick's, and it's not, my project isn't tied to that location, but it has an impact in how I approach the project, maybe. So
thanks. I'm going to put it out to the people attending. I see, or I don't see Phil Hamilton, but I'm sure he might have some interesting questions about material. And if anybody else wants to put in something, that'd be great.
Nick, I'm just kind of interested. You started off thinking that you could slip cast your material. Is that still a possibility?
I think so. I think it was just something that I didn't have the time or the resources, you know, here at home to properly do. I did buy pottery plaster and I made some slip molds, but the molds themselves will take a week and a half to properly dry before they can be used, you know, and then finding a kiln that I could, you know, pretty much work next to for 2 to 3 weeks at a time, constantly putting things in, trying out different temperatures, different glazes, because I also wanted to play around with using the slate as glaze. But yeah, it really just came down to not having the time or the resources to do it. And then, but I think it's probably possible. It's the really small like experiments I did were promising enough for me to go in that direction. I just had to sort of take a turn.
Of course, yeah, I understand the limitations, but do you think it could be kind of a direct replacement for, let's say, porcelain or any of the slip casting materials that we currently use for mass production?
Replacement? No, I definitely think it would still be sort of a novelty thing, more so than like a complete industrial replacement. I think it.
Sorry, maybe, but could you make usable, you know, cups and saucers and plates, maybe a range of stuff out of it?
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say so. It's with the I did manage to get some of my material samples fired. I don't know if you saw them. They were brown amongst the rest of the gray ones. Those were fired, and because I think of the chemical makeup of the slate. They went brown after firing, but they are significantly like lighter and stronger, and they feel like terracotta. You know, they feel just like a slightly different like hue of red or purple, or red or orange. It's a slightly different hue, but from what it seems, I spoke to a ceramicist about it, and they seemed like they were suggesting that it was able to, you know, take glaze and to be refired again. So it's there's definitely a possibility there to go like a complete ceramics project route.
Nice. Yeah, super. It looks great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, those 3 images you had with the blue dots.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what is the finish you managed to achieve on that?
So I sort of wanted to keep the overall finish of them quite raw. I did like sort of leaving things the way they are. That's also another reason why I wasn't, the fired slate turning brown wasn't necessarily a problem, but it did remove it from its identity in that it wasn't, you know, the color of slate anymore. So the final objects, the bowls and the trays, I wanted to leave them like raw. I wasn't worried about you getting rid of all the bubbles in the cast. I wasn't worried about how nicely or neatly cut the slate, the raw slate that was like paired with it was. I did really want to leave it that like sort of raw and not try to hide that, I guess.
I mean, it almost gives it like a human form with like bubbles and blood molecules and things.
Yeah. Sort of like character, sort of separates each one from another.
And did the place inform your design?
All three of my final objects started from, they all have a 27-degree angle as their, I guess, as a prominent feature in their design. They're all conical in form. At that 27 degrees that I sort of borrowed, I took inspiration from the slate vein on the island. So it's not so obvious, you know, but there is sort of a strong connection from their form and where they came from.
Okay. Cool. John, I was wondering, you know, for me, I'm always kind of interested in, you know, the material exploration is always really interesting, but the industry head in me always kind of wonders how you might, you know, bring this into your future practice. Like it's nice to research about materials and understand the material nature, but do you think you will be more interested in working with metals into the future and kind of developing a practice that way, or is it just kind of a one-off kind of exploration and you know, or maybe you can expand a bit?
Yeah, so I guess, I guess the metal isn't the most, I guess what I'm really interested in is like the story around the material. So it's not that I specifically am really interested in metals and I would like, you know, just work with metals, but in the future, in my practice in the future, I will continue to look at like the stories around materials. If there's a story with an interest in material, that I would try and tell that through objects, or you know, using my design practice. So yeah, I mean, I was really interested in copper because I knew there's a lot of interesting stories around it in Ireland and like interesting history of it. But also just there's a lot of interesting properties, and I thought there was good scope to explore. But it would be the stories really that I would take into my future practice, and that interest. So, I don't know if that answers your question.
You said you learned about annealing, I think, at one point there, and you were kind of talking to, you learned about older ways to work the metal. Is that true? Or
yeah. So
did you get to practice them?
Pardon?
Did you get to practice any of them, or you know?
Yeah. So I was doing a lot like hammering, and a lot of the sort of experiments I'm doing with the copper didn't accumulate in the final objects at all. So I was hammering a lot, and I had different types of hammers, and they, even though I liked that, they didn't end up in the final objects. Yeah, there's a lot of research, a lot of different things that then in the final project. But I guess that I think I wanted to make the project clear, or as clear as I could have. So yeah, that makes sense.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Nick.
John, just picking up on the theme of time as well in your pieces, and they, you know, I know from supervising the project that was kind of partly the thing that bound these together as well. They're kind of, you know, you might categorize them in the homeware category, these objects, but for both of you actually, but in your case, in terms of that and the connection to time, where do these live, or are they more vehicles to demonstrate a story and a principle?
Well, I think they're more vehicles to demonstrate a story, and but in relation to time allowed the objects to. It gave them sort of using time as a secondary sort of theme allowed the objects to have this sort of allowed me to design objects with like a ritualistic aspect to them, and allowed me to put them into a routine in your daily life. So, for example, the water bowl one, you could imagine that on your dinner table, and you use it after dinner with your family, and then you fill it up, and it takes a day to purify. And in that sense, all of them you're using at a certain interval, and then you start using, you're really interacting with the key property of the material. So that's what using time allowed me to do. It allowed me to design these sort of routines and rituals with the key properties of copper at the center. Yeah.
Great. What would you do differently, both of you? You've obviously taken this, I see John there, who's a current student and might be thinking about this as a route, or maybe not, but having started on these projects, they don't follow the kind of maybe the typical path of a human-centered design project. You're going off to dig around in a hole in the ground and see what's in there, and kind of experiment with the bits that come out. Would you do it all again, or would you, and this is to both of you really, would you structure it differently, or would you approach it differently?
I think I would definitely do it again, and I've sort of already been looking around where is there another like opportunity similar to the one that I found. But I think I think it was a really interesting application, I guess, of the research, how I learned to research. It was, I don't know, it made a lot of sense to me how to apply certain research methodologies to this kind of project in ways that were obvious to me, where in other kinds of projects, I sort of had to dig around and figure out how do I get the information I need or want to find, So it's sort of, it doesn't really share a lot of similarities to your typical human-centered design project, but I guess the research behind it sort of, they all follow, it follows in close like footsteps to a lot of the other projects that I've done before. But yeah, it's what I would change, I guess, is I don't know, it sort of comes down to time and just being able to play a bit more, but everything has to come to an end, I definitely would have liked to go down the ceramic route, or do something on a larger scale rather than just these sort of tableware, these ornamental pieces, something bigger, furniture or street art, or land art, or something just on a larger scale could have been really interesting. Yeah, but would I go back and change anything specifically about my project? I don't, there's not too much I would change. I'm quite sort of happy with the direction things went and how I got there, if that makes sense.
How about you, John?
Yeah, I would do the same again. Some aspects of my think it would have been nicer to have more time towards the end to to really work on the details and to take my time and take my time to sort of end of the project. But I guess my research at the start of the project was unfortunate. I guess another thing that would be, I guess it was affected by COVID. So in a different, COVID wasn't there. I got to willing to, otherwise I would have been willing to explore casting copper and doing different things. So in another universe, I might have been able to do a bit more in that regard. But in general, I'm happy with how I approached it, and I would do it again. Mostly the same. So.
I think that might be a universal take on all projects that we ever take on, really. Yeah. Would you love more time to see the thing out or to take a new approach. Yeah, look, it's been really enjoyable chatting to you both and seeing the work again. I'm dying to see where you take this type of work. The mention of land art from you, Nick, has me very excited in terms of larger scale installations cropping up around Cork somewhere or beyond. So it'll be exciting to see where you end up with that. Thanks very much to the people who've sat in. I know we're kind of a small group, but it's the quality that counts, and there's some high quality projects here. So well done to you both, and we're looking forward to seeing what your next steps are.
We'll kick off. So my name is Keith McMahon. I'm one of the lecturers in the product design department, and I'm delighted to be chair of the Wellbeing Room today with Jack, Daniel and Smiley, and they're going to talk to you all about the work. So I won't labour on that. However, I just want to mention, and Sam alluded to it, how delighted we are that the students have come to a point and done some really excellent work this year, given the sort of conditions that they find themselves in. And particularly in this group, thinking about the idea of well-being sort of during a pandemic is really something to grapple with. And all the students have kind of come through various challenges and really excelled in various aspects of what they've been doing. For example, Jack, who's looking at healthy work-life separation, which is something I think that we can all identify with, and also kind of moving outside the boundaries of interaction design, looking at CADs and rendering as well. And that's kind of more in a private space. Daniel looking at the public space, and what does it mean to have sort of virtual sunlight and social infrastructure, and reimagining public spaces is something that we all have to think about right now. And over to Smiley, who was looking at taking something that we traditionally accept as a given in terms of what we're doing in terms of rehabilitation, and kind of really challenging something that's been probably around for, Smiley can tell us all about it, for quite a long time. So, and also managing to create connections with so many people across at a very high level in kind of professional sports as well. So I'm just going to actually read out a short description of the theme of well-being, and then I'll hand over to the guys. So I'm just wondering who would like to go first in terms of sharing, and maybe we can get you guys making sure that we can share screen. Is it yourself, Jack?
Yeah, I'll go first.
I suppose in terms of the well-being theme, and these students have been designing for physical health and mental well-being, and the text that they pulled together is the need for thoughtful and deliberate designs to improve people's physical and mental well-being is clear now more than ever before. And do the students as designers have a degree of responsibility for the well-being of those they design for? And these three projects take a very experimental yet very practical approach to improving our well-being. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Jack to take us through Diffuse.
Cool. Hello, I'm Jack. I'm an interaction designer, but you'll see I decided I didn't enjoy screens for this project. This is Diffuse, encouraging a healthy separation of work and life while working from home. So the problems we've all faced working from home, I did a survey, kind of an international survey, and within that survey, 62% found that their work time and personal time wasn't separate. And 55% then said they scored poor well-being on the WHO 5 questionnaire. Many were dealing with increased stress, increased burnout from working from home. But even though they were struggling, 70% said they still wanted to continue remote work in some capacity post-pandemic. I found then that the issues people were facing in this scenario were worse for people who are working and trying to relax within the same space. So I ended up with this question: how might I create a healthier separation of work and life for those working and living in their bedrooms specifically? So this is where I ended up with a physical product, which is kind of odd for an interaction designer. But this is a lamp, it's diffused. kind of the first kind of feature of it, I would say, is this shifting of light that takes advantage of the circadian rhythm, shifting from blue light into the red spectrum as you move through the day. Kind of has the subconscious effect of encouraging a person to relax and unwind by the end of a workday. The second effect of the light then was this like physical kind of interruption of work, which I created kind of using kind of an analog effect of moving these LEDs further away from the lens, and that would narrow the beam of light and focus it. So instead of being diffused and nice to work in, it became narrow and pointed and kind of awkward to work in that environment. So encourage people to kind of get away from their desk, stop working for a little bit of time, and then just kind of it working in action, just speed it up so you can get a sense for what that would feel like throughout the day. So yeah, and the timing of those interruptions was based off another brain rhythm. Circadian rhythm is kind of days. This rhythm is much tighter. It's called the ultradian rhythm. It's basically this 90 minutes of concentration within the brain and this 20-minute lull. And we tend to work through it. Our work days are not based off of our brain activity. We fight through these lulls, but I decided to take it as an opportunity to redesign the work day to suit the brain better. And then there's just a half day and a shorter time based off of those brain patterns. But I also wanted to use another sensory output, which was smell. So there are 2 scented oils within this lamp, one for your workday and one for relaxation. And it's amazing, kind of like when the work scent is going, whatever that is you choose, when you take a break, you walk back into the room, it welcomes you back, it gets you back into that mode. But then the reverse of that then is once that changes into that relaxed scent, it really makes a room feel totally different and really helps you create like a physical separation between that work time and relaxation time. So that was just a quick overview of Diffuse, and yeah, thanks.
Thanks very much, Jack. There are a virtual Buddha bus there from everybody. Daniel or Smiley, which of you guys would like to share now?
I'll go next.
Go, Smiley.
Okay, so I'm Andrew McArdle, or otherwise known as Smiley. I'm a product designer who likes to solve problems in a most sustainable fashion as I can see fit. And this is my project, Inflate. Inflate is a lower limb immobilization device. It offers the user more control of their recovery journey than what would be offered by a traditional plaster cast. It's aimed towards extreme sports athletes who would be probably injured more regularly than others. And its kind of mission statement is to reduce the overall downtime of the injury by merging the timeline for healing a bone and the timeline for physiotherapy post plaster cast. So yeah, plaster cast is a bit like medieval technology, I think anyway. It comes from me having suffered a lot of injuries through sports. I've often cut off plaster casts. I've suffered muscle wastage and muscle atrophy from wearing plaster casts. And I always found that the one size fits all solution of a traditional plaster cast is kind of outdated, and it just doesn't give any consideration to your personal circumstances. I also spoke to some of the world's best downhill mountain bikers, extreme sport athletes, and they agreed with me that the time spent in plaster cast leaves you feeling kind of detached from the recovery process. It leaves you somewhat depressed because you're unable to make progress with the rehabilitation. So the device incorporates the technological principles of soft robotics. Soft robotics is the use of air pressure and a compliant material to achieve a predetermined task. The materials are usually a rubber, like a silicone rubber or so. Here's an example of a soft robot. So it's able to stand up on its own and it's able to hold something or grip something. I built my own soft robot, and when I pressurized it, it gripped my arm, as you can see here in the picture. So I seen that the principles of soft robotics did work and I could apply them. I did some modeling as well, some foam modeling, because I'm a product designer and that's what we know best is blue foam modeling. So just to kind of work out scale and size and fit on the lower limb. To make the air pressure that's needed in the device, I had I have a built-in pump and a motor, and a PCB board and a battery to take care of all the electronic stuff. The device is controlled by an app on the user's phone. This allows the control of the pressure in any given scenario. So I want this thing to be a companion for the whole journey. So at any stage of the recovery journey, the device, it can start out as like an immobilization device, which completely stops the leg from moving. But when the user starts to do stuff like weight bearing in maybe week 4 of the recovery, or when they start doing some gym work, the device can be tuned and changed to act as a support. It also offers electric muscle stimulation technology, blood occlusion therapy, and a massage function. Here's a visualization of what it might look like when the device kind of is inflated and wraps around the limb to kind of give support. The device is like modular in its design, so that it has a main body that sits on the front of the leg, and the sizing can be achieved, or the correct sizing can be achieved, by adding or removing actuators. They're little pieces that click together. So you can see here on the left the female end where the arms would click in, and you can add these depending on the size of the leg or the girth of the leg. The kind of visual language that I wanted for a device, I wanted to show strength and support, and that it was trustworthy, but yet I didn't want it to look too intimidating and look like it was scary, because my first renditions of this thing, it looked like some crazy sea animal or sea creature that would crush your leg. So yeah, that's Inflate, a companion for the recovery journey for athletes who want to recover as quick and as best as they can. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Smiley. Excellent. Great to see. And I guess, you know, you can go on NCAD Works and see a lot of this material again, because what you're actually seeing here, and the guys only have 3 minutes to kind of talk about, like, would it be almost a year of work from the very germ of thinking about it, and then from January on, it's been like full on 24/7 work on this. So there's just a huge kind of catalogue of work and experimentation behind this. And yeah, Mike, it's very interesting. Andrew, I hope I never need one. Yes. So last but not least, we'll go to Daniel.
So I'm Dan. I'm a designer who's driven by curiosity and experimentation. When I see inspiring work, I want to understand the processes and techniques involved and try my hand at them. In addition, I'm interested in emerging technology and how I can use it in design. My major project is Virtual Atrium, a street pavilion and light installation which simulates natural sunlight through the use of a carefully considered light source, optics, and a bespoke blue sky filter. It has an array of benefits for the individuals who pass by and interact with it, and the society it lives within. With Dublin at an inflection point in terms of our nighttime economy, we must design lighting solutions that cater to the needs and desires which currently fall between the cracks of city planning. I utilize virtual reality in my design process for testing and visualization. Virtual reality and the Unreal game engine were invaluable tools given the circumstances and the limited access to a physical workshop. In the future, I'm excited to see how else I can use these technologies to visualize and test designs. Throughout my project, I learned how I work best and what my design process looks like. In the beginning, I cast a wide net and tried my hand at a variety of techniques and technologies which I found exciting and which I identified as critical to learn. The early experimentation phase of this project was vital, and I acquired a lot of skills that I would be excited to use in the future. The positive effects that the virtual atrium can elicit were informed through personal experience and by what I learned while writing my research essay, which focused on the impact of lighting on our well-being. I chose to focus on some of the more universal effects of light, such as how it can affect our circadian rhythm and how a considered color rendering index and color temperature can improve the appeal of a space. Virtual atrium functions as social infrastructure, acting as somewhere people can spend time, advertise events, and feel safe. It is a collision point and a signpost. Public lighting installations have had a positive effect on the nighttime economy when installed in other cities. This project answers Dublin's need for designed lighting interventions as we work to improve what our city offers by night. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thanks very much, Dan. Fantastic stuff. And again, only a snippet, but I know certainly from Daniel's process, he's been doing things that I've never seen any product design student do before in terms of experimentation with technology and ways of prototyping, etc. So I think that's something that across all of the students here, they're always moving into new territory and just, you know, making their dreams a reality and pushing into ways of being and ways of operating the world that are new. And I suppose that's maybe one of the reasons why they are product and interaction designers, because they have that hunger to do that. So exciting to see when they head out in the world now, what happens. So we'll open it up just for questions here. They can be, Lauren says, great work, guys. I agree. We'll open it up for some questions here. If anyone has any questions at all, just put them in the chat. It could be a simple, or what was the most challenging thing about the whole process? Or if you could do it all again, what would you do differently?
I actually want to ask Jack a question, if that's okay.
Go on, Smiley.
Hi, Jack. Just your lampshade, it's the first time I've seen it, and it has like a mad design on it, on the outside of it. Where did that come from, anything, or what's that about?
Yeah, that's I forgot to mention it, actually. It's called a reactionary diffusion model. It's basically an algorithm that tries to mimic kind of a natural diffusion of matter, basically, but it's sort of what you'd see in like ferrofluid or brain coral, have a similar pattern to them. It's I picked it because it's cool, and also it diffuses oils really well by because it's basically a maze. The oil has to run through it. It spreads it out and lets it diffuse. But also, reactionary diffusion. I was trying to diffuse the scent and light. I was like, it all connects.
Cool, nice one.
I have a question to put to you guys, actually. So for each of you to answer. So in your description of the theme for this particular session, you talk about whether designers should have a degree of responsibility for the well-being of the people that you design for. Like, should you be ethically thinking about, if I'm designing this really addictive app or a product that will, maybe keep somebody gaming for 20 hours or whatever it is, should you consider the well-being? And I'm interested just in each of you, what are your thoughts after working under the kind of umbrella theme of well-being about a designer's responsibility for well-being?
That's interesting. Yeah, I think ideally I would like that a designer is responsible and they can act accordingly. But I think when it comes to industry and it comes to money and profits being made by big companies, that maybe that goes out the window a little bit. But I do think design is the agent for change, and designers do have a lot of power to make those changes. So kind of I like to bear that in mind when I'm designing stuff, that it might just be a good idea or something that I think is good, but it also has the power to be life-changing or world-changing or whatever, and just kind of bear that in mind.
The kind of responsibility there. And
Yes.
it is about, designers definitely have more power than they used to, certainly, and it's more of a recognized essential. So think about that now, you guys, in 5 years or 2 years or 3 years or 1 year, and when you're at the top table and somebody is proposing something a little bit dodgy, how can you think about the broader well-being? Dan or Jack, do you have any thoughts on that, about designers' responsibility? And then we've got some questions in the chat. So we'll, if you guys have any thoughts about designers' responsibility, and then we'll move on to the chat questions.
I suppose like in interaction design, we're kind of taught about this a lot. We're told to think about it a lot, mainly because the main apps you use every day are like as Smiley said, once you start making money, ethics goes out the window. Facebook and Twitter, all of them are ethically fairly bankrupt. Don't tell them I said that. They might want to hire me, but they're not good, and we're kind of told that. We're told to keep that in mind kind of fairly constantly, which is good. And it's something kind of that if they had been taught 10 years ago, we'd be in a much different and probably better place than we are now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think certainly with that technology at the time, it was kind of a bit like the Wild West in terms of Facebook and stuff, setting stuff up. And now I suppose we should be more aware and more able to ascertain maybe the other motives behind things. Whereas back then, everyone was just delighted you could find people on the internet. Cool. Thanks, Jack. Very thought-provoking. And Dan, what are your thoughts on it?
I don't really know about like having a responsibility, because I know especially with my project, it ended up in like the well-being space, but it wasn't like the goal I had at the very start. But like what I found was some of the more worthwhile like avenues to like find an opportunity to design in will care for the well-being of people and society, and like in my case, nighttime economy. It was sort of just an opportunity to design in where it wasn't like my initial goal, but it's sort of where I ended up because it seemed to have the most opportunities.
Yeah, I think it is a huge opportunity, and even thinking about there's care of older people and how society is going to change and how public spaces might need to adapt to that as well. I think there's loads of scope there. So I'm seeing some great questions coming in the chat. So we'll give it a go. I'll ask a question. So yeah, what was the biggest challenge each of you faced and how did you overcome it?
I'll go first, because my biggest challenge, I think, was the technology of soft robotics and trying to get an understanding of it, but because of the pandemic and COVID restrictions, I couldn't get in contact with anyone to actually see an actual robot or see how it works and stuff, and what was actually needed to make a robot work. I could only just look at stuff online and try to get an understanding of it. I did get speaking to an expert from UCD, and I had a good few chats with him about it. But yeah, one of the biggest things for me was to actually even just getting a robot and seeing what sort of pressure does it take, or how much does it need to squeeze, and what does that actually feel like on my leg? Do you know what I mean? And stuff like that. There's all these questions. So that was my biggest challenge. So actually trying to get involved with the technology I was trying to utilize.
Get your hands on it. Thanks,
Yeah.
Smiley. Dan or Jack, what do you reckon?
I think especially at the start, because I was trying to learn a lot of skills that like I had no idea what I was doing. So just like trying to find the right material to teach me how to do it, which in itself became like something I got better at, learning how to like what I didn't know, basically trying to identify what I didn't know and how to learn.
Great, thanks, Dan. Jack, your biggest challenge?
Yes, I suppose similar to Dan, kind of I was in a space I wasn't used to in product, like going to more product design sort of thing as an interaction designer, 3D modeling and stuff. But I actually think that the biggest one was the biggest challenge, I guess, was that work-life balance. I was learning about the best ways to do it and how to help people do it, but at the same time being unable to keep a good work-life balance myself at the same time it's always a challenge, but kind of harder. I didn't have my lamp finished at the time to help me do it, so it's a bit tricky. Yeah,
you can sell them to next year's students only, well, probably bespoke at this stage, so only like 500 euros a pop or something like that. Great. Sarah, that's a lovely question. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask it to the guys yourself?
Sure. Hi, guys. Great presentations. Thanks for sharing. It's a great event as well. Yeah, my question was around the fact that probably you didn't have a lot of time to develop these, and with all the COVID restrictions, I imagine it was pretty challenging to get everything done. So I wonder what would be the thing that you would like to develop further now at this stage.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for the question. I try and develop a model that works better to refine it a bit more, and I'd also like to investigate the materials much further. I think that would go hand in hand. If I had a model that would work and see how it worked, then I could find materials that would work better and work in tandem with it. But that would be my next thing, would be to investigate the materials and how it would actually work, and get more hands-on with it and get more experience.
More testing.
Yeah, more
Loads
testing,
of testings.
yeah, because it was really hard to do any testing. It was really hard to actually make a model as well. We had like very limited access to workshops and stuff like so. I probably didn't do myself any favors with this project, like picking to do it during the pandemic, but that's what happens.
Great.
I know, like myself, what I there was sort of a gap in like real life user testing. I had like the VR user testing and stuff like that, but I'd love to have been making like actual lighting fixtures and putting them out, say on like, I don't know, Grafton Street or somewhere like that, just to see in the real world how they'd respond. Because like I have what people say they do, but I'd like to see like in reality how it would work.
Great, that's always a good way to test out and prove your concept, right?
Yeah, I think I'm quite similar there as well, where it would be really interesting to actually put the product in someone's life for a while, and just sort of like for like a long, I got it in for a short length of time. So I'm talking like to see if there was any kind of like noticeable improvement after like a week or 2 weeks of using it, because it's just we just don't have that time once we're finished to really get that data. So I'd be really curious if I just had like a month, put it in a few people's rooms and see what came out of it. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Great, thanks for your questions, Sarah. I think and I think everybody in the call would agree that despite all the challenges there, the guys have all managed to, through video, photography, renderings, model making, etc., just create something that looks and feels very, very real, despite all of the restrictions. So well done, everyone. And we have a specific question here for Smiley from Anne. Anne, would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question, if you don't mind? Or I can...
Oh, yeah, no, that's fine. I'm unmuted. Yeah, Andrew, I was watching and was laughing because I'm actually wearing a very heavy boot post-fracture and I'm on my 5th week. And one of the big difficulties is getting up the stairs. I was wondering, have you considered kind of comfort and weight when you're thinking about this? I know it's difficult to stabilize at the same time.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in those feckin' boots, and I actually took one apart for the project just to kind of see what it was made of and all the different materials are in it, and they are fairly weighty. My idea would be considerably lighter, as it would be maybe based around silicone rubber and stuff like that, and it'd be more so the air pressure that's providing the grip, the strength, the support. So yeah, it'd be considerably lighter and a lot more comfortable and a lot more nicer for the user to experience.
Okay, well, bring it on. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Lovely question.
Thanks, Anne. You're going to have to break something else now in a year or two when Andrew has the stuff on the market.
Give me a call, Anne.
You could be the first, but during the development process, be the first user tester. Unless anybody has any last thoughts or things, Jack, Dan, Smiley, anything else you want to say? We got a thumbs up from Sarah.
Thanks a million to everyone that came, and thanks for the questions.
Thanks for coming. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a million, and we'll see you back in the main room. And yeah, do check out the NCAD Works website to see the kind of other videos as well, or to relive this whole experience too. Okay, thanks a million, everybody, and thanks especially to Jack, Daniel, and Smiley for sharing their work and answering all those questions.
Hi, I'm Leanna O'Clerig. I'm interested in exploring the future of work, and I love to collaborate with diverse teams. So this is Libera. It's an app to empower platform delivery riders with insights from their collective data to push for better work. So apps like Deliveroo use the psychological techniques of computer games to nudge workers towards behavior that's beneficial to the company, but not necessarily to the delivery riders themselves. As you can see here, half of online platform workers earn less than $2 per hour. This creates a fictional illustration of the system of labor behind the interface. a fiction in which the delivery rider can make as much money as he's willing to work for. You pedal more to earn more. However, these apps provide one of the most controlling forms of work in over a century. According to the RSA Action and Research Centre, there's a risk that gig workers will stagnate in low-paid jobs and struggle to make ends meet over time. These companies carefully craft the working experience of delivery riders in order to reduce labour costs. Riders don't know how their pay is determined or how they're rated, and therefore they don't know why their contract might be terminated. An increase in riders recently has resulted in a reduction in the cost and frequency of orders. So basically, riders now are working longer hours for less pay than before. So Libera is an app for platform delivery riders to gain control over their work by crowdsourcing their collective data, arming riders with the kind of insights that delivery platforms already use to perfect their algorithms. Libera shares these insights with the gig worker unions to press platforms and governments for better pay, conditions, and protections. So how does it work? You turn it on to see whether it's worth your while to work now. As you can see, there's 37 riders working now and 32 active orders, making it moderately busy. This is the kind of data that these platforms already collect on the riders, but they're aggressively secretive with it. Then you answer questions while you go about your shift to glean better insights into your work. So this rider has waited 17 minutes for an order. That's unpaid waiting time. And you converse and organize with other riders. After speaking with other riders about this particular issue, here there's an invitation to a SIPTU meeting with the Minister for Trade and Employment. And you can share this invitation out, share that you're attending out to other platforms and to other people. And then Libera passively collects data while you work. So that's the kind of data that your phone already collects, like location and speed and all of that. Then you see the insights from your work. So data alone isn't really decipherable, but the insights from that data, as you can see, this rider waited 42 minutes at restaurants this shift. That translates to €8 lost this shift while waiting at restaurants. And then you can compare the data with other riders. So data on its own is valuable enough, but once it's aggregated with others and you can see patterns within it and insights within it, it becomes very valuable. In fact, that's the value of many of these work platforms. As you can see here, the average earnings have been going down over time. The number of riders has been going up, and the average number of orders per hour has been going down. Anyway, that's all I can talk about. So if you'd like to check out my work, you can visit my portfolio site at lianaoclery.com or lianaixd on Instagram. Thank you.
Really excellent work, thank you. We can always give a silent clap on Zoom. There'll be time for discussion with all of the presenters after they've all presented, so we can really get into and maybe dig deep and ask some questions we have, but such a relevant and interesting topic and something again that's so prevalent nowadays and maybe unspoken about. Next presenter going to speak is Renata Dima, who will be presenting her project Ubiq, which I did pronounce correctly, I hope.
So my name is Renata Dima, and I'm a designer driven by the need for helping people who are soft locked out of society through design. So meet Ubiq. It's derived from the word ubiquitous, because I wanted everyone to have a ubiquitous internet access. So Ubiq is actually a service that provides off-grid communications to those who can't afford or simply don't wish to pay for mobile data, and it provides an alternate solution. So it poses the question, what if you could communicate with those in your proximity without the need for an internet connection? Ubiq is really needed because we've seen a huge decline in the growth of internet access as we get closer to the fringes or the outlier communities. It also allows internet access for contacting people like you in your proximity. So in simple terms, it lets you keep in touch with your friends completely offline. So some of the early stage research that I conducted pointed to a problem that was bigger than I really anticipated, and that was the broken internet. The early internet was still serving the purpose of early stage communication. And secondly, there was a huge online disconnect. While that shows that we are actually more connected than ever, is the quality of our connection really reflecting the quantity? Our needs are actually changing and technology needs to accommodate for that fact. So the aim of my project was to provide real, meaningful connections unhindered by the challenges of the modern day internet ecosystem. So actually throughout the project, I consulted and talked to a lot of people, including industry experts, designers, and users to inform my project. I gathered primary data by reaching out to potential stakeholders, experts, and users through surveys and interviews and all various means. So now we'll go through kind of some of the features of the app itself. So your account will actually be stored on your device and not on the cloud. As well as that, you'll be given a backup key in case you forget your password. You can also download that as a GPG file, and you can upload this at any time to restore your account. And this is a little bit of onboarding, kind of some explainer screens for what's going on behind the scenes and how the technology is working. So Leaps refers to your connection actually uses other people's devices to reach further, letting you chat offline. So if you think about it in this way, your network connection jumps off people's phones to reach further. If you're offline, you can continue to chat as long as you're within 100-meter range of the person you're chatting to. You can also see your connection status displayed, and you can check how many leaps your connection makes to reach your contact. So with that, you can actually search in your locality or proximity for nearby users and groups, and you can kind of add your interest to your profile and search by your interests. And that way you can discover users and groups and people near you with the same interests as you. So this was a quote from Electra, which was the co-founder of one of the biggest mesh networking projects in the world. And she said this about this project, that we're all waiting for the killer application that makes mesh networks interesting. And this, Ubiq, could be it. To finish off, I envision a world where anyone who wants to connect can. And the tools that we build connect people to each other, to their communities and to global society. So let's revolutionize internet infrastructure together by using alternative technologies such as mesh networks. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Renata. A really interesting project. And again, we will have time to discuss and maybe kind of discuss the commonalities and differences between these projects afterwards. So save your questions and comments for them, please. I'll hand you on to our last panelist for this session, on to Delia McCarthy, who's going to present her, who's going to present her project, The Booby Trap.
Hi, I'm Delia McCarthy, and I'm a designer interested in human-centered design that will bring about social and environmental change. This is my project titled The Booby Trap, which is a speculative design experiment aimed at sparking conversations about breastfeeding in Ireland. The project takes a speculative design approach centered around the question, what if women could sell their breast milk? To explore this, I designed 3 props which fit into this narrative. The milk tester, the milk pasteurizer, and the Breast Friends app all act as props for videos which I have posted on social media. The goal of this project is to use technology combined with design to begin conversations about Ireland's negative attitudes towards breastfeeding. Why am I asking this? Ireland has one of the lowest breastfeeding rates in the world, with our number just half of the global average at 6 months. This is something we clearly need to be talking about. So the first prop I will discuss is the Breast Friends app. This is the hypothetical platform in which mothers could buy and sell their milk. It was designed to start conversations about society, capitalism, exploitation, and breastfeeding rates. I made 2 clickable prototypes as props for the social media videos. The first shows the process of buying breast milk on the app. You can enter your address and choose a donor based on a number of factors, including the antibodies in their milk and the amount of milk that woman has for sale. Once the milk has been purchased, it gets delivered to your home, just like Deliveroo. The second user flow shows the testing process of syncing the Breast Friends app with the milk tester via Bluetooth. The results of this test are then shown on the app, showing any drugs, alcohol, pathogens, or contaminants in the breast milk sample. The next prop is the milk tester. This tests the donated breast milk and is reminiscent of blood glucose meter. It was designed to start conversations about bodily autonomy, the contents of breast milk, trust, and safety. The last prop is the milk pasteurizer. This pasteurizes breast milk by heating it to 60 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes ensuring that it is safe to drink. It was designed to start conversations about the health benefits of breast milk and its composition. The 3 props feature in 2 videos, which I posted to social media to reach my audience. I don't have time to play them for you now, but they are both available on my NCAD Works page. At the time of the final submission, the videos had received over 4,079 views and 129 comments across multiple platforms. The most popular platforms were Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Here it was clear that the conversation and debate had been started as commenters were asking questions and educating each other. On Facebook, Lauren Fleming summed up the project well. She commented, "Seems like the disconnect between the public and breastfeeding is so big that the majority of the country might be interested in taking something like this seriously as a step away from formula, because they wouldn't have to reckon with their internal biases against breastfeeding." So what did we learn from this experiment? We learned that some people thought this was a real concept and thought that selling breast milk was a good idea. This possibly answers my earlier question of if breastfeeding made a profit, would it be more valued by Irish society? We also learned that people are interested in having these conversations given the opportunity. And that is it. Thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to some questions at the end.
Thanks so much, Julie. Excellent work. The presentations are over now, and we can take some questions from the floor, maybe before we start a panel discussion on some of the themes that we saw. But if anyone has a question there, if it's for a specific person, please direct it to them, and just feel free to come in and speak and ask anything, or you can raise a hand if you prefer to Zoometic your way through it.
I've got one for Delilah.
Go for it, Pat.
Hi, yes.
Hi, how are you doing? Yeah, I love it. Great graphics and great product use. I'm just wondering, just in terms of your own mind, the idea that you had, is it more a piece of like critical design that doesn't have intention for practical use, or do you actually see a potential practical use of this in the future, or does it sit somewhere in between in your mind at the moment?
So it kind of sits in between, because it was kind of critical design, like design for debate. But it was one of the only projects in the class that actually had its desired effect on the world. Like it went out, people saw it, it had its impact. So while it was critical design, I think it like lived its life out and about. So it's a bit of both, I think.
Thank you.
Really good question, and I'm sure that there's a room in Silicon Valley somewhere where someone's looking for a few million to start this up as a real ironic less product. Has anyone got any other questions for some of the designers, or even comments would be welcome, I think.
They're all amazing projects. Like they're absolutely incredible, and it's just amazing how you managed to actually create such well thought projects in such a time of chaos as well. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had a question for Leanne actually as well. Like they're all Unreal projects and stuff. I was curious to know if like what impact or what did like Uber drivers and delivery drivers think of your proposition?
Yeah, they were they loved it. They're like, yeah, well, like I want this, you know. They're also, I feel it's also kind of an area where there's a lot of people looking at it, and a lot of people are trying to contact delivery riders and get them to do projects with them. So the ones that I spoke to anyway were they're like energized and they want this because there's like loads of momentum right now for them to unionize and to organize. But perhaps a tiny bit cynical about it.
Any more questions before I maybe put some myself to the designers? I think people are being shy and parents don't want to tell them how wonderful it is, but you can, it's wonderful. And if we were all in college today, and if this was the opening of the thing, we'd all be going around slapping each other on the back and telling you how wonderful everything is. So it is great to be here. And as you mentioned, such an achievement in the year we've had, and really, really striking that even given the kind of breadth and different directions and different forms of design that even these 3 projects here illustrate how far students were able to get and how far they were able to push past the challenges that they faced, and really is quite momentous. I might ask the guys a question as a kind of way to maybe get a bit of discussion going, but I would really welcome anyone who's here, indeed some ex-students here too, who might have views or opinions, and current students indeed. There seems to be a bit of a theme that in this is some of the work of almost hacking or subverting some of the digital tools or product types that maybe we're used to seeing in commercial propositions, hacking them to try and build the world we want or create the space for community within that. Is that something that was conscious in you, or was it more something that came out of actually just trying to solve a problem you saw? And maybe take turns or discuss yourselves, take over the conversation if you wish.
Yeah, a bit of both. Like, I don't think I consciously set out to try and like really subvert anything, but I mean, the problem is really clear, and the problem is like a handful of companies. So, and they just have access to a resource that's like invaluable, and they're not going to share it. Like, even if you do like a freedom of information request for your data, say as like a Deliveroo rider, they are likely to just be like, nah, and deal with the legal consequences, because it's just too valuable for them to really share. You know, and they have there's departments full of social scientists who design the apps to make the riders. And sorry, this is like a continuation for answering Dermot's question. Like teams of social scientists who design the app to make the riders feel like they have agency. You know, like I can work when I want. You know, so like it's already kind of like a subvertive act in itself in the way they design it. But you know, you don't work when you want to work. You work when it's busy. They just don't tell you when the busy times are or not, because they'd rather you didn't know. So you just went out and cycled around looking for, you know, rituals to pick up an order. Like I heard if you cycle around a restaurant 3 times, you get an order. You know, so it's already I guess subversive and cynical anyway. So just trying to like wrangle the information out of their hands was what I was trying to do anyway.
Interesting.
And I suppose in terms of mine, not that I necessarily set out to subvert anything, but considering the technology I was using, the technology itself was subversive because it was trying to open up the internet, because they already had this kind of free and open model where, you know what, guys, the internet can be free, and we've made it free. So even by having it that open and that broad, and it's kind of a threat to telecommunication companies, even in general. And maybe that is part of like why this hasn't been taken up. But a huge part of my project was to see, yeah, actually, if this technology is so good, and it is, because for example in Germany there's thousands of people connected, and thousands of people in rural places getting free internet who otherwise wouldn't have been able to because they don't have coverage over there. And it's already being used, but why isn't it being used globally? Perhaps because the technology itself is too technological, it's too software based, like it's too perhaps hard for regular people to understand. So I suppose I tried to discover how I could apply design to that, and how I could make it more user friendly and more accessible to the wider public.
Interesting, yeah.
I think I definitely tried to subvert things. It was like hard to walk that line between shaking things up and getting people talking, and then people having an outright like riot in the comment section. That was difficult, but I think outraging some people is important if you're going to be starting that kind of conversation, especially online. You're going to get more people commenting if it's a little outrageous. And I mean, I got lots of comments saying, oh, I had no idea this was a thing. I didn't know Ireland had a problem with breastfeeding. So I reached a group of people by using the social media that I never would have before. And I think that was a limitation of design for debate or critical design. It's usually designed for other designers. So the people you're designing for don't tend to really see it. Whereas with the Booby Trap, I got so many younger, well, not young girls, but like girls in their 20s who wouldn't really be thinking about breastfeeding generally. And now it's maybe even just on their radar. And it wouldn't have been before. So I think it was a win in that way.
I think it clearly was, and they were all wins in that way. But anyone in the audience have anything to add or questions then, maybe in relation to what the panelists have said?
Yeah, actually, I was wondering about Renata, if obviously the product was really interesting and technology was really interesting. I was wondering if there's any interesting use cases of it being either subversive or just in general, if there's any interesting use cases that came out of the product, because it's obviously a very interesting technology.
So that's a hard one, because I also tried to look at it from that angle. I suppose, what are the different applications for this technology, because it's already being used in one way. And I suppose the answer to that is there are, I suppose, different projects exploring into this, which is things like setting up networks for after earthquakes or hurricanes or any kind of natural disasters, to get internet networks up and running really quickly, as well as that in protest cases. So if you have like a mass protest in town, this is to provide a local internet for everyone to communicate. And even in the case of, let's say, political protests, we saw in Hong Kong over the last few years, they were using a mesh-based app called FireChat to communicate secretly and securely with each other, while not allowing anyone else to, I suppose, spy on them. So there are all of these interesting kind of use cases as well, but I had to focus on one. Obviously, I couldn't do them all, and mine explored more kind of local-based, proximity-based. My question was, can I get strangers to come together that were in the same place and were interested in the same things? Can I get people to discover, like, again, other people who are there, but they might not know that they're there? So that was my use case. I hope that answered the question.
Has anyone else from the audience got another question before I go and ask another one myself?
I've got one question, I guess, for everybody. I remember when, again, years ago when I was going through the course, I can remember one instance where I had a particular project where I got marked down, I guess, because I didn't have a physical model to mark against, and it was on the sheet of the things that you needed to mark to get the score of the test, the grade for that, semester or whatever. And I'm kind of curious about with how fast design is moving and how fast technology is moving, and actually like what we think of product design today is very different from 10 years ago. Have you found that, have you found any challenges with, the way these things are being taught or assessed over, the last couple of years? Because again, the work you guys are doing is already just inherently by how quick technology moves, so different from the people 4 years before. Have you come across any challenges or hurdles that, I guess are new challenges that were specific to you guys?
Yeah, it's hard to know because I don't know like how things were 4 or 5 years ago. I only know what I've gone through. But yeah, like things are moving, like changing really fast. So there's kind of one thing I learned is there's kind of no point. Sorry, this isn't fair. No, there's no point in just like going deep on a software or something. But the skills that will last and persevere are the like soft skills, the like the techniques and the research and that, rather than do you know Figma really well. Of course, it's really important to learn the tools, but the things that will last are the approach. I don't know if that answers your question.
No. I think that's really fair. And actually, I'll say for me, that's a really astute kind of thing to say is, yeah, the soft skills are 100% like learning how to have an idea, or how to problem solve or refine or synthesize. These are the things that are going to follow, because you're right. Like I've learned 12 different forms of software since I left, and I'll probably learn 12 more because they just change every year. Yeah, so that's a good point.
Yeah, not to play down like those skills. Sorry, Renata was going to talk. Like obviously, I really enjoyed learning to code and that gives you lots of like room to do more things when you learn that, you know. Sorry, go on, Renata.
She's talking about me when she's talking about software. I actually really wanted to work in the gray zone between design and development, so I had to like hold myself back from going full blown into the technology of this and actually building a working version in my neighborhood and community. But I suppose to answer the bigger question, design is just evolving so quickly. And even so, I'm an interaction designer, me and Diana. For example, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, this course didn't exist in NCAD, and we were all under the bracket umbrella of product or industrial design even. And I suppose that shift has come from a need, I guess, and technology evolving so quickly. And as Liana said as well, it's the soft skills. So I think it's more important that you can adapt and learn these new softwares and technologies and skills rather than the actual software technology itself. And as for kind of the design thinking or design systems, I think I almost want to say that all of that is has been in the same format for a while, even if the physical manifestation isn't exactly the same. So even if we're using like a different template or we're calling it something else, I think design thinking, it has this kind of one format. Feel free to correct me, but.
No, I think that's fair. Yeah, I think when you find that you're coming into the industry, you'll find that actually most companies have their own version of design thinking and how they do design, and how, you know what I mean. We all learn the IDEO or the Stanford D School style of design thinking, but then we actually come into the real world and we see actually that doesn't apply everywhere. Or you go into service design and design thinking, it's kind of out the window because there's service design methods. So I think that's fair, but a lot of those things haven't changed in a long time. That's true.
It's really lovely to hear the students saying these things. We've just finished a program review process where I was saying the same things, and so it is that balancing act of, I think you need enough hard skills to get your first job, and after that the soft skills progress you. Karina, you have your hand up there for a while. Can we pass over to you for a question?
Yeah, no, I wanted to speak to Renata. I just want to make a comment and also to ask her a question. As part of my work, I visit a lot of people at home, and I went into a big apartment block the other day to visit two young parents and their baby. And as I was leaving, I was chatting to the dad, and he said, I asked him, do you know many people in the building? And he said, no, we don't know anybody. And these are Irish people, but there's, it's quite a cosmopolitan community. So what struck me about Renata's project was that because it's local, and I think you said it just goes 100 meters, it wouldn't go, is that correct? That's the range. But what struck me was for apartment blocks where people actually want something local, they don't want to go through the internet, but they want to develop neighborliness and they want to get to know each other. They also want to know what the format perhaps for the whole block is, and if you're new, what's available, what's just for shopping, what's nearby. When you're new, you could have something like that in an apartment block. So I think that's a fantastic idea that you developed. And the other thing was just about range. What is it in UBIC that constricts the range to 100 meters, if I understood you correctly?
So if I can go by the first point you made there, that's actually a really great point. And not only that, but imagine, let's say, even a family moves to a new region, even in the city or a new county. They don't know anyone. The children don't know anyone. They don't know how they can find anyone. Or if you think about perhaps someone international, perhaps they've come here to study. Again, they don't know anyone. They don't know, for example, they don't have any local groups. Because usually you find people through your interests, right? But they don't know those local groups because they can't access them. So that was kind of a bid to be able to let people kind of just put in on their phone, okay, I'm interested in cycling or in creating a book club. And then you could kind of make a broadcast, and anyone in that range who like had it on could see that pop up and say, oh, do you want to start a book club? And in that way, it kind of facilitates interactions between strangers, but who are interested in the same things. And to answer the second question there, the answer is that it's the technology itself. So the phone has a limited, it's actually through Bluetooth technologies, kind of. So it's limited by the antenna and the network card that your phone allows, because your phone is pretty small. And apart from that as well, it's 100 meters from one phone to another. However, if there's a third phone, you can potentially reach 300 meters. If there's a chain of 5, that's 500 meters. So all it matters is that you can make up a long chain between where you are and the person that you want to talk to. So in a high density area, like a neighborhood, potentially if everyone has it, the more people have it, the more connection you can make.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's like a notice board, really, isn't it? Yeah. Well done. Thank you.
And I think Katrina touched on something I was going to ask about as my last question before I leave it open to anyone else. But I suppose to the panelists first, and then if anyone else wants to add, what, I suppose, does community mean to you, and where do you feel you live it, and where do you feel you want more of it, or what do you want to do with it? And not just as reflected maybe by your projects, but any other thoughts you have.
I think I'll go first, if that's okay. I think I was trying to start a conversation, obviously, and I wanted, there's already a really like tight-knit breastfeeding community out there, but that's kind of, you're only in it if you're in it. You have kids, your partner has kids, your friends have kids, like that's your life. And it's younger women who are never spoken to. Oh no, we have 55 seconds. Will I keep going? Basically, I just wanted to create a community, like to speak to the community of women of all ages, to get them talking about this, to kind of diversify who knows about breastfeeding. It's not just for women in their 30s, it's for everyone. Does someone else want to say something in the 30 seconds?
Yeah, I could just jump on that. It's tapping into community that already exists there, mostly migrants, which I didn't really get to touch on in my presentation there, who really don't have much of a sense of community with each other, and just kind of strengthening that.
I must draw to a close, but thanks a million to our panelists for presenting this fantastic work and for being fantastic students and people to know, and to you all for coming. Bye.
Okay, I think we have most people back. I hope you enjoyed the presentations and discussions as well. It was certainly some really interesting conversation in ours, and lovely to see the work from my point of view again. I think it's clear to me, seeing the students' work throughout the year, that you've grappled with some pretty extraordinary circumstances in terms of your last year experience, but you've done an incredible job to pivot your practice and to create outputs that are diverse and rich and exciting and contemporary and award-winning for many of you. So a big well done to you all. The evening is just a snapshot of the work that these guys have all produced. I strongly encourage you to visit ncad.works, where you can look at each of the projects in detail, and you can follow up with the students. Their social media platforms are on there, and you can get in touch with them if you want to find out more about their work. So on that, and within the hour, I'd like to finish by congratulating all our graduating students on your work, and wishing you all the very best as you move on to your next stages in your careers. It's really been a pleasure teaching you all, and I think the staff here on the call would echo that. You've been a great year, and you've really delivered some super projects. So well done to everyone. Hope you all enjoyed the show, and we'll keep in touch.